This is a tale of an ordinary forest ranger who inherits the legacy of the Druids and finds himself transported to the Twilight City, where a pack of wolves transforms into a surging tide of darkness, racing and hunting beneath towering ancient trees and dense forests. Chapter 1. Awakening. A searing pain radiated from his brain and heart throughout his entire being, causing the young man, lying in bed with a hazy consciousness, to emit a faint groan. In the wooden cabin, an elderly man gazed calmly at the youth, his eyes betraying a hint of anxiety as he spoke. This is the legacy of our tribe. Although we have not awakened the power within our bloodline, it will be passed down through generations. Only by enduring the transformation brought forth by this awakening can one hope to master its control. Another elder sighed, lamenting, "I never anticipated that this unforeseen event would lead the frail young Jason to awaken his bloodline. He possesses the weakest constitution among the younger generation. I sincerely hope he can endure otherwise. I dread the conversation I will have to have with his father." Old Harry, have there been any instances of individuals surviving the awakening of their bloodline? The dim light flickered upon Old Harry's face. He seemed poised to respond, but fell silent once more. Time passed, and within the unseen depths of Jason's body, a quiet transformation was unfolding. A ferocious, mysterious force within him gradually softened, swiftly mending his shattered form. Fractured bones began to heal, and damaged organs were restored, as his bodily functions slowly returned to normal, emanating an astonishing vitality. The following morning, radiant sunlight streamed through the cracks of the window, illuminating Jason's face. Suddenly, the corner of his eye twitched, and in the next moment his eyes fully opened. Jason, or Quileute, as he was known in another life, awoke from a slumbering consciousness. Quileute, a forest ranger nurtured under the Red Banner, had always harbored a profound fascination with the natural world. After graduation, he unexpectedly joined a domestic international ranger organization. During a mission to protect endangered species, a bullet, seemingly from nowhere, pierced his body. When he awoke again, he realized he had traversed into another realm, his soul occupying this body, while the original inhabitant perished due to a failed bloodline awakening. Fragments of memory flashed through his mind as Quileute recalled the remnants of the original owner's memories. Jason resided in a place known as Foxtown in the United States. He was meant to study in New York, but his father had insisted he return to his hometown's high school, citing ancient family myths as the reason. His family bore the bloodline of the Alpha Great Wolf, and during the ages of 17 to 25, individuals would experience the potential awakening of this lineage. Should the awakening be successful, one would transform into a colossal wolf. However, there was also the possibility of never awakening at all. Jason's father was one such individual who had failed to awaken. Of course, Jason dismissed his father's tales as mere nonsense, believing that he merely sought an excuse to distance himself from Jason and enjoy a life with his mother. In a rebellious phase, Jason chose to return to Foxtown, taking residence in his family's old home. His father entrusted Jason's care to a distant relative, Old Gil. However, an unfortunate fall led to a head injury, which, while not fatal, triggered the bloodline awakening, resulting in the loss of a once vibrant life. Jason sat up abruptly, surveying the furnishings of the house, struggling to suppress his discomfort as he approached the mirror. The once familiar yellow complexion had transformed into an unfamiliar pallor. Although Jason had always possessed commendable features, his frail physique had rendered his demeanor rather ordinary. However, the recent shift in his bloodline had catalyzed an astonishing transformation. His chiseled features complemented by a robust physique, his height had surged from 1.76 meters to 1.83 meters. While not conventionally handsome, he certainly presented an eye-catching appearance. Glancing at the resolute, sunlit visage in the mirror, Jason felt a fleeting lift in his spirits. After all, who wouldn't wish to appear more attractive? This further solidified his realization that he had indeed traversed into another realm. After a moment of contemplation, Jason strode purposefully outside, as he had more pressing matters to ascertain. Chapter 2. The Werewolf. Outside lay a sprawling ranch. The gentle morning sun and the invigorating scent of fresh grass and dense foliage invigorating Jason's senses. The perpetually overcast Foxtown was graced with rare sunshine today, yet Jason's mind was elsewhere. Standing on the grassy expanse, he let out a furious roar, the power of his bloodline surging within him, a wave of rage flooding his consciousness. Suddenly, his clothes erupted, and he transformed into a massive black wolf the size of a pony, howling defiantly at the sky. However, Jason's circumstances were far from ideal upon becoming the giant wolf. His fury shattered the chains of reason. and he felt his body slip out of his control. The seething anger kindled a desire to obliterate everything in sight, yet a dwindling fragment of his rationality compelled him to flee toward the distant forest. Like a streak of black lightning, he dashed through the underbrush, leaving a path of chaos in his wake, his speed akin to a GTR racing on a track. The colossal black beast raced through the thicket, startling the woodland creatures into a frantic escape. Suddenly, he pounced upon a deer, indulging in the primal instinct of the wolf that lay dormant in his bloodline. Amidst the forest, a cacophony of sounds erupted, prompting the black wolf to release its prey and cautiously survey its surroundings. Without warning, a gray beast lunged forth, colliding with the unsuspecting black wolf, and a fierce struggle ensued. The gray figure revealed itself to be another giant wolf, significantly larger than the black wolf. Capitalizing on its size advantage, the gray wolf quickly subdued Jason beneath its weight. "Jason, wake up! Jason, please wake up!" As the frantic black wolf struggled, voices echoed in its mind, gradually leading it to abandon its resistance. The crimson hue of its eyes transformed into the wolf pack's characteristic golden brown, the frenzy receding and clarity returning to its gaze. Despite being firmly pinned beneath the imposing gray wolf, Jason felt no fear, for he recognized that this colossal creature was one of his own kind. A profound weariness enveloped him, instilling a desire to succumb to slumber. Instinctively, Jason relinquished his wolf form, reverting to his human body. In the final moments, he barely registered a voice calling out before succumbing to a deep sleep that, "I am Riel. Please wake up, Jason." The gray wolf regarded the unconscious man before him, his glistening form resting on the ground, a complex expression crossing his face as he hesitated for a moment. Transformed into a completely naked woman with short hair, she swiftly scooped up Jason and dashed out of the forest. When Jason regained consciousness, he found himself once again lying in the wooden cabin, awakened by the tantalizing aroma of food wafting in from outside. After a day without sustenance since his awakening, his stomach growled in hunger. Rising from his bed, he stepped outside, greeted by the familiar sight of the ranch, now cloaked in the darkness of night. 3 figures were busily tending to a grill outside. Upon noticing Jason emerging from the cabin, they gazed hungrily at the half-roasted lamb, their mouths watering in anticipation. One of them jested, "Why are you just standing there? Come over and eat." Jason, unperturbed by their teasing, prioritized his ravenous hunger, choosing to indulge before engaging in conversation. He seated himself and began to devour the food voraciously. Among the trio were 2 friends of Jason's father, Harry and Billy, along with Jill, a distant relative and the owner of the ranch. They had discovered Jason when he collapsed and brought him back to safety. However, they bore another significant identity. All 3 were esteemed elders of the Quileute werewolf clan. Due to various circumstances in the past, they had not awakened the bloodline within them and were currently mere mortals, tasked with guiding newly awakened Quileute werewolves. After satiating his hunger, Jason engaged in conversation with the 3 Quileute elders. The Quileute werewolves were not the traditional werewolves of legend, capable of walking upright and transforming during a full moon, losing their human identity and becoming feral beasts that, in reality, the Quileute werewolves were shapeshifters who opted to assume a wolf form. Unlike conventional werewolves, mature Quileute werewolves could transform at will, retaining their human intellect, reasoning abilities, and personalities even in their wolf forms. Jason's initial transformation had overwhelmed him with rage, clouding his senses. There have been instances in the past when newly awakened Quileute werewolves unintentionally harmed friends or family, prompting the elders to bring Jason to this secluded ranch. During their conversation, Jason gleaned further insights about the Quileute werewolves. Firstly, they possessed 2 forms. Their original human form, which significantly enhanced their physical capabilities to the level of elite athletes, and their formidable wolf form, wherein their strength, endurance, and speed transcended human limits, rivaling even that of vampires. Additionally, they boasted extraordinary senses and rapid healing abilities, with eyesight akin to that of an eagle. In essence, the giant wolf form was akin to that of a monstrous entity, the 3rd legacy. Considering Jason's lack of mastery over the Quileute werewolf powers, the 3 elders decided it prudent for him to reside at the ranch temporarily, until he could fully control his transformation before returning to the family home in Foxtown. After dinner, everyone returned to their respective rooms. Jason suddenly recalled that he seemed to have forgotten something. Who is Riel? Is he another werewolf? I can't believe I forgot to ask. With a resigned shrug, Jason decided he would inquire with old Harry and the others the next day. However, There was another pressing matter that required his attention. A wolf totem suddenly materialized on Jason's arm, but he was certain that this peculiar mark had not been present on his body before he had only discovered it upon waking this evening. He had just consulted 3 elder Quileute, and they too were baffled by its sudden appearance. Jason's gaze fixed intently on the totem on his arm when, to his astonishment, the wolf's silhouette began to move. A powerful force drew Jason's consciousness inward, inundating his mind with a torrent of information. Overwhelmed, his brain's protective mechanisms kicked in, and he succumbed to unconsciousness. Not again. I fainted, Jason lamented internally. This was the tale of a demigod druid from the continent of Azeroth, who, on the eve of igniting the divine flame, had taken every precaution yet still fell victim to an ambush by enemies that, in a desperate act, he attempted to self-detonate his unformed divine essence, taking a significant portion of his foes with him that a minuscule shard of his divine essence ruptured through the fabric of time and space. Ultimately, it landed on Blue Star, striking Qianlu, who was on a mission at the time, merging with his soul. This fusion was the true reason behind his death and subsequent soul traversal. Upon successfully awakening the Quileute werewolf bloodline, Jason became a shapeshifter, activating the power of the divine essence shard nestled deep within his soul. This bestowed upon him the Druidic legacy, as the Quileute werewolves are, in essence, a branch of shape-shifting druids. The legendary druids are known for their ability to transform into fearsome beasts, guardians of nature that tear apart any intruders. The distinction lies in the fact that shape-shifting druids utilize their inherent natural magic to transform, while Quileute werewolves harness their bloodline's power to achieve the same, resembling bloodline sorcerers. Certainly, the former possesses a higher potential, as evidenced by the demigod druids who, in times of great conflict, could metamorphose into ancient, colossal dragons, shaking the very foundations of the earth and altering the landscape, a reference familiar to those who have played World of Warcraft, akin to Deathwing. Fortunately, the divine essence shard was cleansed of the demigod druid's soul imprint during its explosive release and the traversal through the time-space continuum otherwise. This narrative would have taken an entirely different turn. Though it felt as if an eternity had passed, it was merely a fleeting moment before Jason regained consciousness, opening his eyes yet remaining silent for a considerable time, as he processed the vast information in his mind. Although the divine essence shard had merged with Jason's soul, its elevated status rendered it beyond his control. Nonetheless, it imparted the druidic legacy upon him, transforming him into an apprentice druid. While he possessed merely a seed-sized amount of natural power within, the initiation phase is often the most challenging. Moreover, he inherited a wealth of knowledge from the demigod druids, which is of utmost importance, providing a robust foundation for his future path of cultivation. Jason raised his right hand, and the wolf totem that once adorned his arm had vanished, now concealed within the depths of his soul's ocean. With a gentle exertion, a vibrant emerald light swirled around his palm. This was the essence of nature residing within him. Although still feeble, it radiated an astonishing vitality. Outside the confines of Jason's vision, the vegetation in the grass was quietly accelerating its growth, with tiny wildflowers blossoming in the embrace of the night. Having just received his legacy, Jason was teeming with excitement, unable to succumb to slumber as he fervently experimented with his newfound druidic abilities, only pausing once. He had thoroughly depleted the natural energy coursing through him. After all, whether in his past or present, Jason had always been an ordinary individual, and he wisely refrained from transforming into a colossal wolf. He began his training in accordance with the cultivation methods of natural energy, as the teachings conveyed. This force was not merely a singular magical element, but rather an amalgamation of various natural elements of the world, such as the fundamental elements of wind, wood, water, fire, and earth in the preliminary stages, followed by thunder and ice elements in the intermediate phase, and culminating in the advanced powers of celestial and solar energies. Within the realm of druids, some favored transforming into fierce raptors, while others preferred the forms of dolphins or orcas, embodying the title of children of nature. However, the initial practice centered primarily around the most fundamental elements of flora and fauna. Jason calmed his mind, directing his focus inward toward the seed-like essence of natural energy within him. In that moment, the world around him seemed to fall into a profound silence. Within his mental landscape, specks of green energy, drawn to one another, began to coalesce and fuse together. At that instant, he felt as if he had returned to the womb, enveloped in warmth, tranquility, and a sense of joyous serenity. Chapter 4. Riel in the early morning. Jason awoke, not due to the excitement of a sleepless night, but rather because he had unwittingly drifted into slumber while entering a meditative state. Although the cultivation of natural powers does not require a fixed posture, embarking on this journey necessitates an adjustment period. Eventually, one may even substitute cultivation for rest. The reason for his early awakening was the unexpected sound of a visitor at his door. He climbed out of bed in confusion, pondering who might seek him out at such an hour. Having recently arrived in Foxtown, he was still unfamiliar with most residents, aside from the 3 elders of the Quileute clan. Upon opening the door, he was greeted by a strikingly beautiful woman with bronze skin and lustrous black hair, her gaze imbued with a hint of untamed spirit. As Jason opened the door, she regarded him with a playful glint in her eyes. Suddenly, Jason realized that he had not anticipated the presence of a woman, having risen from bed clad only in shorts, his upper body bare. He hastily apologized and retreated to dress properly before re-emerging. When they reunited, Jason discovered that this enchanting woman was none other than the daughter of Old Harry, the very same Riel who had transformed into a gray giant wolf and tackled him the previous day. Riel was among the first of the young werewolves of the Quileute clan to awaken to her powers. Previously, Old Harry had enlisted Riel's assistance in locating the uncontrollable Jason, allowing Riel to aid him in mastering the strength of his giant wolf bloodline. As Jason expressed his gratitude towards Riel, he failed to notice the fleeting, awkward expression that crossed her face upon mentioning the events of the previous day, her eyes betraying a hint of shyness that she quickly masked. She was reluctant to relive the embarrassing moment. The Quileute giant wolves initially awakened through the stimulation of anger, making it easy to lose control during transformation. To prevent this, one must learn to regulate their anger while in the giant wolf form, thereby maintaining consciousness. Riel explained, I gradually mastered my bloodline powers after 3 or 4 transformations. Jason found her insight profoundly reasonable. Experience indeed yields wisdom. After sharing her thoughts, Riel led Jason to an open field of grass, where she endeavored to guide him in learning to control his giant wolf transformation. Curiously, Jason inquired, how does one transform when in a good mood? Just then, he noticed a peculiar smile spreading across Riel's lips as she approached him, which sparked an unsettling feeling within him. With a resounding slap, Riel delivered a sharp blow. The force was considerable, igniting an inexplicable surge of anger throughout Jason's body. With a fierce glare directed at Riel, he opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly found himself convulsing uncontrollably. With a howl, a massive black wolf emerged in his place, and in the next instant, it lunged forward, tackling Riel, who was still too stunned to react, to the ground. As she instinctively attempted to push the giant wolf away, she found herself utterly immobilized by its overwhelming strength. Realizing the peril she was in, staring into the wolf's furious visage, she felt the weight of her negligence. Just as she prepared to transform into her giant wolf form to defend herself against the impending attack, the enraged giant wolf gradually regained its composure, a glimmer of amusement flickering in its amber eyes. Riel was momentarily bewildered by the rapidly shifting narrative when suddenly, a warm, large tongue licked her face. In the next heartbeat, time seemed to freeze as their gazes locked. Uncertain whether this constituted a primal instinct of the wolf or a kiss, Riel, in a fit of spontaneity, pushed Jason down and unleashed a flurry of playful punches upon him. Ordinarily, Riel would never have been able to topple Jason in his wolf form, yet in his current state of embarrassment, he was devoid of any resistance. Drawing from his 2 decades of experience in his previous life, he knew that in such moments, it was best to concede, so he merely shielded his head, allowing her to have her way, as the blows were hardly painful. As for why he didn't revert to his original form, that would only exacerbate the awkwardness. Nevertheless, this girl was quite fierce. This was Riel's first encounter with such a scenario, and her instinctive reaction was to retaliate against Jason. However, noticing his lack of resistance, she softened her blows. Although to a giant wolf, her strikes felt no more than a tickle, they soon grew tired and lay together on the grass. After a brief respite, Riel could no longer contain her curiosity and inquired, how did you master the giant wolf form so swiftly? Jason too was taken aback, as during this transformation, he had indeed experienced a moment of loss of control. Yet, almost instantaneously, the natural power within him awakened, pulling him back from the brink. This return was quite natural, as the essence of nature itself served as the key to unlocking the druid transformation secret. At that moment, the giant wolf totem within him intertwined with the seed of natural power like leaves in the wind. However, Jason had no intention of revealing his secret, opting instead to chuckle and attribute it to his extraordinary talent. Riel did not press the matter further, yet this unexpected incident had significantly loosened the ties between them. allowing for a more open conversation regarding the current state of the Quileute werewolves. Chapter 5. The Dense Forest. A week passed in the blink of an eye. Foxtown, nestled in the northwestern corner of Washington state, is a small town known for its abundant rainfall and dense forests. Initially, its economy thrived on the lumber industry, but the decline of logging over the past decade has led to economic downturn. Yet, the silver lining of this decline is the gradual restoration of the forest vegetation. Located at the intersection of the United States and Canada, vast stretches of woodland and prairie remain untouched, inhabited predominantly by rare animals and plants, with only the occasional hunter or traveler passing through. Amidst this sprawling forest, Jason and Riel, transformed into giant wolves, navigated swiftly through the underbrush. In recent days, Jason had been diligently honing his natural powers. Although the essence of nature still resembled a seed without significant change, it had undoubtedly become more concentrated. Once this essence reached a certain threshold, it would begin to sprout, marking the moment when Jason would officially become a true druid, though merely a novice druid. It signified Jason's formal entry into the realm of the extraordinary. In addition, Jason discovered that the bloodline power of the Quileute werewolf also possesses the ability to enhance the natural force, thereby accelerating the cultivation of this energy. The two powers complement each other, and given Jason's relatively low druidic rank, he is able to reap considerable benefits. While the natural force has yet to manifest as combat strength, it has already significantly facilitated the growth of his giant wolf bloodline. Jason's physique is now notably larger than when he first transformed, nearly comparable to the giant wolf that Riel has become. Furthermore, as a druid, often referred to as the child of nature, the natural force has augmented his stamina and accelerated healing abilities. Once he entered the forest, his senses heightened dramatically, as if the entire woodland were welcoming his presence. Consequently, instead of experiencing a decrease in speed upon entering the jungle, Jason found himself moving even more swiftly. Riel could intuitively perceive this, watching as Jason gradually surpassed her, each step seemingly imbued with foresight, rendering the forest inconsequential. For a moment, a medley of emotions washed over her, and she began to believe in Jason's extraordinary talents, especially since she had always been the fastest among the Quileute clan. At that moment, a massive black beast and a great gray creature raced through the dense forest, freely pursuing one another. Jason, we have strayed too far from Fortis Town. We should return. Riel communicated with Jason through the telepathic abilities granted by her giant wolf form. At that instant, Jason seemed to sense something, suddenly accelerating in a particular direction, eventually leaping to a high cliff to survey the landscape. He let out a powerful howl, proclaiming dominion over the expanse of the forest. Riel, witnessing this spectacle, paused momentarily and slowed her pace to join Jason. As they gazed forward, the undulating hills stretched endlessly, the forest a vast sea of lush greenery, exuding boundless beauty. Unbeknownst to Riel, the natural energy surrounding them was rapidly converging upon Jason, causing the natural seed within him to grow stronger. Perhaps his current state resonated with the essence of nature, or perhaps a certain point within him had been liberated. Soon, he sensed that his natural seed was on the cusp of germination, though this moment of enlightenment was fleeting. As Riel called out to him once more, Jason awoke from his reverie, feeling a tinge of regret, but ultimately preparing to return, acknowledging that they had already ventured far. Even at their speed, it would take considerable time to retrace their steps. Just as the black wolf prepared to turn back, a gust of wind swept toward him, carrying a scent that caused him to pause, urgently signaling Riel to halt her return. Riel, it seems that the wind carries the scent of some creature, and there appears to be a significant number of them, Jason remarked, focusing on a specific direction. I believe we should investigate. Riel, taken aback by Jason's words, hesitated momentarily. But the next instant, she seemed to grasp the implication of his statement and nodded slowly. Once Jason determined the direction, he took the lead, guiding Riel forth into the distance. In their usual outings, apart from honing their transformative abilities through rigorous training, the two would also engage in hunting. Although the Quileute werewolf clan is not numerous, the few members possess formidable appetites, thriving on a diet of meat. Life is not akin to a cinematic narrative. Relying solely on the sheep reared on Lear's father's ranch is insufficient for their sustenance over the long term. Consequently, Jason, who has been residing at the ranch, has only sporadically encountered other members of the Quileute tribe. Aside from leading lives akin to ordinary humans, the Quileute werewolves occasionally venture into the forest to hunt, indulging in the thrill of the chase, as hunting poses little challenge for them. However, they have recently observed a significant decline in the forest game population. Lear speculated that the frequent appearance of the giant wolves has frightened many animals in the area, causing them to migrate elsewhere. Now, they often find themselves having to travel considerable distances to capture prey. Wolves possess an acute sense of smell, capable of detecting the scent of their quarry from as far as 24 kilometers away. Yet, Jason and his companions had to run over 10 kilometers before they finally laid eyes upon a herd of deer. This particular herd consisted of elk. Drawing from the knowledge of his previous life, Jason keenly assessed the situation. Elk, second only to moose in size, rank as the second largest in the deer family. They have a horse-like physique, adorned with antlers, and their deep brown bodies are often marked with white spots. Adults typically weigh between 300 to 400 pounds. And before him lay a magnificent assembly of over 200 large elk, leisurely grazing on the luscious grass of a verdant valley. Unable to restrain himself, Jason wiped the corners of his mouth, his eyes gleaming with the fervor of a hunter who has spotted his prey. One might ponder, should not a druid be a guardian of nature and its creatures? However, a deeper understanding reveals that for decades, the United States has implemented wolf hunting legislation, categorizing wolves as an endangered species. The decline in wolf populations has led to an increase in large herbivores, as in this forest, aside from wolves and large felids. The elk have few natural predators. The herd of elk, blissfully unaware of the impending threat, continues to graze on the rich pastures. What? You wish to drive this herd of elk back near the ranch? Lear exclaimed in astonishment. After all, this was a congregation of over 200 elk. While the individual strength of the giant wolves is considerable, the collective force of the entire herd cannot be easily matched by singular power. Furthermore, the distance from the ranch is quite substantial. It is akin to a martial arts master being able to vanquish foes within a 10-step radius but facing an army. Should they be surrounded, they would inevitably meet their demise, unable to confront the collective might head-on. This historical caution among martial artists regarding the court stemmed from their fear of military forces. Nonetheless, martial artists possess their own advantages by evading large contingents. They can wield their individual combat prowess and stealth to disorient armies. Moreover, the elk herd is not an army. Jason's confidence primarily arises from the understanding that, as wolves, they exert an absolute genetic dominance over the elk herd, instilling an innate fear of their natural enemies, rooted deep within their instincts. He had once spent time in the heart of Inner Mongolia with friends, experiencing the life of herders and the art of grazing. The phenomenon of the herd mentality is well known. Sheep follow the direction of their leader, and when the leader halts, the entire flock comes to a standstill. This principle, grounded in the Mongolian herding tradition, suggests that one need not control the entire herd of deer, but merely the direction of the lead stag. This presents a rare opportunity, as this group of elk must have recently migrated through this area, and missing this chance may mean the prospect of future encounters is uncertain. Jason meticulously observed the herd, his keen eyesight rivaling that of a raptor, enabling him to scrutinize every detail. By guiding the elk back towards the vicinity of the pasture, he could essentially sustain the daily needs of the Quileute tribe. Although he had caused Old Harry some inconvenience, enjoying complimentary meals, lodging, and the company of women, Jason felt a twinge of guilt, stemming from his upbringing in a nation that valued reciprocity. As large herbivores, elk possess remarkable stamina when faced with danger. They can sprint at speeds of 70 to 80 kilometers per hour to seek refuge. In terms of speed, a typical wolf hunts at approximately 80 kilometers per hour. But the endurance of carnivores is considerably inferior. However, Jason had learned that upon transforming into a colossal wolf, one could exhibit astonishing physical prowess, averaging around 120 kilometers per hour, with explosive bursts nearing an incredible 170 kilometers per hour, an impressive feat for an individual. There was no need for stealth. As a dark behemoth wandered through the forest, it bore a striking resemblance to a lion patrolling its territory. In the moments leading up to its approach to the elk herd, time seemed to freeze, as the deer ceased their grazing, alert to the intruder. Perhaps bolstered by their numbers, some vigorous adult stags lowered their heads, contemplating whether to charge at the impending foe with their formidable antlers. The giant wolf, seemingly oblivious to the mounting tension, resolutely advanced toward the herd, its aura of a supreme predator exerting pressure on the already frail nerves of the deer. At last, a young stag, unable to restrain its bravado, charged at the colossal wolf, its robust antlers poised to strike. Yet in an instant, the 300-kilogram stag was brought down. The wolf's jaws clamping fiercely around its neck, severing its throat, and blood spattered forth as a menacing aura emanated from the wolf's amber eyes. Panic swiftly spread among the deer, who faced two choices: to channel their fear into rage and charge the wolf, or to flee in utter terror. The herd, opting for the latter, witnessed the strongest stag emit a resonant call, leading the group in a hasty retreat. Drawing from its prior experiences, the lead stag recognized that predators typically hunt in packs. Although the size of this wolf was unprecedented, discretion prevailed, and they made their escape, true to form. Shortly after their departure, a gray giant wolf emerged from the right, stealthily encircling them. If the lead stag could speak, it would undoubtedly boast, You think you can outsmart us with such trivial tactics? You shall eat the dust. Swiftly, the herd of deer veered left, executing a graceful drift, while the leader galloped away without a backward glance. Unbeknownst to the deer, this was merely the beginning. Two colossal wolves rejoined each other, their plan unfolding unexpectedly smoothly. After a brief exchange, they vanished into the thicket, continuously emerging around the deer herd with a deliberate intent to drive them in a specific direction. As dusk settled in, the sun's lingering rays illuminated the earth for one last moment, igniting the clouds in fiery hues. Over 200 elk charged forth like an army, their thunderous hooves causing the ground to tremble beneath them. After traversing the valley, the elk arrived at a new haven, where a lake formed by converging streams lay nestled amidst fertile land, lush with delectable grasses. This revitalizing sight invigorated the weary herd, and once they realized the wolves had ceased their pursuit, the lead elk exhaled a sigh of relief. Lowering its head, it drank from the sweet, clear waters of the lake before guiding the herd to establish their new life in the sanctuary. Jason and Leal also felt a profound sense of relief, recognizing that their successful relocation of the deer bore an element of fortune. Exhausted, Leal finally reverted from her wolf form, while Jason, bolstered by the forces of nature, regained some of his strength, allowing them to reach their destination before darkness enveloped the land. This location, carefully chosen by Jason, was fortified by the valley and the lake, creating a natural barrier. The only route leading deeper into the forest could be intercepted, establishing this area as an excellent grazing ground. Here, the herd could thrive, providing not only sustenance, but also valuable resources such as deer hides and antlers. Chapter 7. The mark of love. Though night had fully descended, the wolves, being nocturnal creatures, were undeterred. The pasture lay approximately 20 kilometers from the Deer's Valley, a distance easily covered by the swift wolves, typically within 10 minutes. However, at this moment, the colossal wolf that Jason had transformed into carried Leal at a deliberately moderate pace. Leal nestled against the wolf, her arms wrapped around its neck, watching as trees blurred by in reverse. The howling wind tousled her hair, and feeling a chill, she instinctively clung tighter to the wolf's robust form, brushing her cheek against its fur, finding solace in its warmth. Noticing the unusual sensation on his back, Jason slightly reduced his speed and channeled the natural energy into Leal, gradually alleviating her weariness of the day while attempting to divert her attention with conversation. Are you still cold? Leal's cheeks flushed, but she offered no reply. Just a few days ago, you were carrying me back. I never imagined I would be the one carrying you this time. Leal seemed to recall something, her face reddening further, yet she remained silent. Curious about her prolonged silence, Jason concluded that she was simply too tired to respond and chose not to press further. At that moment, Leal felt a sudden warmth enveloping her from within, which she attributed to her own emotions, as the events of that day had profoundly impacted her. After all, Jason was her fated love. When a Quileute werewolf encounters their fated beloved, an uncontrollable bond known as a mark arises. Meeting one's destined partner is a serendipitous event, a matter of fate. Once the mark is established, the werewolf sees the beloved as their sole companion. This particular narrative unfolds after Jason faints. Upon gazing at his face, she realizes he is her marked lover. In a flurry of urgency, she carries Jason back and later seeks the assistance of her father, Old Harry, to arrange for her to train with him. Had Jason known the truth of the situation, he might have commented to Leal that seasoned hunters often present themselves as prey. On the ranch, a campfire had been ignited outside, where Old Harry and Old Gil engaged in conversation, but their eyes occasionally drifted toward the forest. They understood that the direwolf was the apex predator of this woodland, virtually invincible unless confronted by a vampire, yet they recognized their own inexperience. Before their anxious thoughts could fully take hold, Old Harry spotted two figures emerging from the trees. As they approached, he discerned that it was Leal and Jason. The direwolf would prepare a belt to secure their clothing before transformation, allowing them to don their garments once reverted, hence both were now dressed. Hey, what delectable dish has Old Harry prepared for us today? Leal inquired, sensing something was amiss, compounded by Jason's ravenous state as he caught a whiff of the tantalizing aroma wafting through the air. Leal's interest piqued at the mention of food, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. Quickly, prepare yourselves. Today, Old Harry has outdone himself with his signature roast. Old Gil, observing the two, chuckled knowingly, his gaze laden with meaning as he looked at Jason and Leal. Feeling the weight of his scrutiny, Leal shot Old Gil a reproachful glance and declared he needed to change his clothes. Jason, meanwhile, retrieved his pack, revealing 2 deer legs, the spoils from their earlier hunt, while regrettably discarding the remainder of the animal. Today we can indulge. Allow me to prepare a feast for you, Jason announced, heading toward the kitchen. Despite his ignorance of the underlying tension, The awkward atmosphere prompted his wise retreat. As he left, Old Harry and Gil exchanged amused glances, sharing a silent understanding. The kitchen of the ranch was rather rudimentary, sparsely furnished and devoid of modern appliances. Jason ignited a fire to boil water while he organized the ingredients. Contemplating his options, he ultimately decided to prepare a northeastern dish, venison stew with potatoes. As an international ranger, he had ventured to numerous locales and learned a variety of culinary skills from local friends. In no time, the kitchen was filled with enticing aromas as the tender venison and potatoes simmered harmoniously together. Once he deemed the dish ready, Jason sprinkled some scallions for flavor, covered the pot, and carried it outside to the table. Gazing at the delectable feast before them, the three individuals could hardly contain their anticipation. The mouth-watering aroma wafting through the air provoked involuntary salivation, prompting Riel to be the first to indulge. Her lycanthropic constitution rendered her impervious to the heat. Although the ingredients were not entirely authentic and the flavor deviated somewhat from the original, the tender, stew-like venison offered an exquisite taste, complemented by the potatoes that had absorbed the rich broth. This delightful experience ignited a spark in Riel. Hastening her pace as Old Harry and Old Jill soon joined the fray, inevitably encountering the scalding meat, a blend of pain and pleasure. Jason, renowned for his culinary skills, astutely decided to participate as well, savoring the venison while relishing grilled lamb chops. Old Harry could not resist unveiling his treasured wine, partaking in a few sips. Perhaps due to the familiar flavors, which left Jason particularly satisfied with this meal. During this time, Riel inquired about his exceptional cooking, to which he simply replied, "I learned to prepare Chinese dishes from my friends in China." After dinner, Jason shared news of the deer herd with Old Harry and Jill. Upon receiving this unexpected yet delightful information, they were eager to explore the valley where the deer resided. Had it not been for the late hour, they would have set off immediately, planning to depart at dawn the following day. Old Harry, being more experienced, proposed the idea of establishing a long-term deer farm. Indeed, Washington state hosts artificially cultivated deer herds, as many parts of the deer are quite valuable, particularly the antlers. Previously, such opportunities had been scarce, and slaughtering them for mere meat seemed a tremendous waste. Jason was in complete agreement, as his interests lay elsewhere. Moreover, he believed that with a skilled herder like Quileute werewolves at the helm, venturing into the livestock industry could be highly promising. This would also provide an outlet for the werewolves' abundant energies, preventing them from spending their days engaging in brawls with vampires. Thus, the nature of the venture transformed, with Jason, Riel, and the three elders leading the werewolves toward a cooperative path of prosperity. Jason made it clear that he would merely lay the groundwork, as this was within his realm of familiarity, while leaving the management to Old Harry and the others. After discussing the general outline, Jason retired to shower, while Riel, fatigued from the day, retreated to her room for rest, leaving Old Harry and Jill animatedly discussing their plans. It is noteworthy that in America, the majority of people do not bathe at night, regardless of having spent the day in strenuous activity. They simply lie down to sleep and wash up the following morning. This custom was one that Jason found difficult to adapt to. Fortunately, he discovered that Riel, being a girl, did not adhere to this norm. Once he finished his ablutions, Jason did not immediately succumb to sleep. Instead, he resumed his meditation, harnessing the power of nature. The seed of nature had visibly grown larger, its energy more concentrated. The remaining task required patience. Rigorous training would prove ineffective in this situation, and maintaining a standard regimen for tomorrow sufficed. Consequently, he could allocate time to other pursuits. The term beast is attributed to these creatures due to their innate magical prowess, enabling them to wield various natural magical forces. Druids possess the unique ability to swiftly acquire magical capabilities through the transformation into these beasts. Aside from their formidable physical strength, most beasts exhibit corresponding talents. For instance, dragons can unleash breath attacks, earth bears command the powers of the earth, and thunderbirds manipulate lightning. When a druid transforms into a beast, they similarly inherit the bloodline gifts of that particular creature. Through repeated transformations into the great wolf of Quileute, he discovered that this majestic wolf also harbors a latent bloodline gift, which typically remains dormant. However, for a druid, this presents no obstacle. The method of activation involves purifying the bloodline power within oneself. At this moment, the totem representing the great wolf of Quileute revolves around the seed of nature within Jason's spiritual realm. It has been previously noted that the forces of nature and bloodline power are mutually reinforcing. The elemental purity of natural power can continuously refine the bloodline strength of the great wolf. When the bloodline power is robust, it can also accelerate the cultivation of natural abilities, which is one of the reasons for Jason's rapid progress, akin to having a minor advantage. Next, He continuously employs the forces of nature to cleanse the bloodline totem, eliminating impurities from within while retaining the core essence of the Alpha Great Wolf's bloodline power. As Jason's will manifests, the seed of nature undergoes transformation, and the bloodline power appears to interchange, joyfully swirling around the totem of the Great Wolf. Previously passive, it now becomes an active force. The shadow of the wolf upon the totem seems to gradually come to life, resembling a true great wolf racing across the plains, howling at the blood-red full moon. As Jason persistently channels the forces of nature, the wolf's silhouette becomes increasingly distinct and agile. He has always consciously purified and nurtured his bloodline power, primarily focusing on cultivating natural power, as the distinction between the two is paramount. However, with natural power encountering a bottleneck, he now shifts his focus to refining his bloodline strength. If we were to visualize this as a game progress bar, the totem of the Great Wolf would be at approximately 97 to 98, pausing for an indeterminate duration before ultimately breaking through to 100. Purifying one's bloodline is a fundamental course for every druid. Typically, it takes a month to transform into the bronze-level Quel'Thala's Great Wolf. Yet, due to the divine shard within Jason, despite its current inaccessibility due to his rank, it acts as a colossal magnetic field, inducing significant changes within him constantly. According to Druidic tradition, mortals are classified as black iron, while transcending into the extraordinary elevates one to bronze, silver, gold, and demigod status. To Jason, these 4 stages resemble the stages of cultivation in mystical practices, refining essence into chi, transforming chi into spirit, returning spirit to the void, and merging with the Tao. The disparities in power between each tier are monumental. At this moment, the totem of the Great Wolf emanated a radiant glow of its own. A spectral form of the colossal wolf surged skyward, as if attempting to break free from its corporeal confines, only to regain tranquility in the next instant. The once naturally verdant totem of the Great Wolf in the sea of consciousness transformed into a black wolf totem. Jason, concerned about disturbing Lear and the others, restrained the impulse to transform and began to examine the awakened bloodline talent of the Great Wolf. To his astonishment, the awakened talent of the Quileute Great Wolf was the relatively rare shadow bloodline ability, which naturally attuned it to the elements of shadow magic. Furthermore, it possessed 2 shadow-based skills, Shadow Step and Shadow Claw. The ability granted by Shadow Step allowed the lurking Great Wolf to become invisible, with the option to actively leap into the Shadow Realm to evade damage from the main plane, essentially traversing through shadows. Shadow Claw, on the other hand, gathered shadow elements to form a powerful claw of darkness, capable of inflicting devastating magical rending effects. From this moment forth, the Quileute Great Wolf should be renamed the Quileute Demon Wolf. If the previous Great Wolf was an agile warrior, the current Demon Wolf resembled a formidable assassin, capable of overwhelming 5 opponents single-handedly. With an enhancement in practical combat skills, it could easily ascend to the status of a top-tier bronze-grade magical beast. Chapter 9, Conflict at Dawn. Lear and the old Harry rose early, while Elder Gil had already set out to summon the other werewolves. Intending to observe the herd of elk, noticing that Jason had yet to awaken, Lear approached his room, knocked on the door, and finding it unlocked, entered. Upon entering, she discovered the room was completely empty. Puzzled about Jason's whereabouts at such an early hour, she turned to leave, only to unexpectedly collide with someone, nearly losing her balance. The person she bumped into was none other than Jason, who had intended to startle Lear. Seeing her about to fall, he instinctively pulled her into his embrace. Initially, Jason approached this with a playful intent, but as he gazed at the girl before him, frozen and staring, the atmosphere grew suddenly awkward. With over 40 years of combined experiences from 2 lifetimes, he was well aware of Lear's affections towards him. However, having suddenly transitioned to a new world, he found himself struggling to adapt, fearful of causing her pain and equally afraid of being hurt himself. In essence, he felt a profound lack of security. In a moment of awkwardness, he managed a greeting, hastily releasing Lear and retreating back to his room. What Jason failed to notice was that once the door was closed, Lear secretly smiled to herself. Jason did not dwell on his embarrassment for long. As an old saying goes, the bridge will straighten itself as one approaches, which encapsulated his current mindset. Earlier, while in his room, he had heard Lear approaching and had suddenly decided against opening the door. The instant she opened it, he employed the Shadow Step ability he had learned the previous night to conceal himself, intending to frighten her. However, this led to an unexpectedly awkward encounter. The original form could also utilize the power of the bloodline totem, though its effectiveness would be halved. It was akin to Jason's current inability to fully harness the shadow traversing ability within Shadow Step. The power of Shadow Claw was also significantly reduced, yet it still augmented the strength of his original form. With further training, he could enhance the potency of these skills in due course. Knowing that they were all waiting outside, Jason swiftly changed into a different outfit, shouldered a backpack filled with emergency supplies, and stepped out. Upon arriving at the camp, Liar and the others were already prepared for departure. The elders, Harry and Jill, also carried their packs and brought along hunting rifles, making them appear lighter in comparison to Jason. After a modest breakfast, old Harry led the group to the stable. The ranch had horses, and since they were venturing deep into the mountains, they decided to ride. The four of them shared 2 horses, with Jason naturally riding with Liar. Although Jason was capable of riding alone, Liar and the others assumed he could not, so he comfortably took his place beside the beautiful woman. Old Harry's ranch housed 2 quarter horses favored by cowboys of the American West for their speed, although they paled in comparison to the swiftness of a giant wolf. Initially, riding was quite entertaining, but as he was not the one in control, boredom soon set in. As the horse passed by a tree, Jason reached out to pluck a leaf and began to gently blow on it, producing a cheerful and simple melody reminiscent of a tune he had learned during a month-long assignment in the Greater Shingon Range with a small ethnic tribe. The expressions of Liar and the others shifted from surprise to attentive listening, as they did not expect a leaf to produce such a song. Though the melody was simple, it was bright and melodious. As they approached the valley, Jason's demeanor suddenly changed. Although he did not transform into a giant wolf, his human sense of smell heightened, detecting an unusual scent in the air that made him wary. At that moment, Liar seemed to sense something too, exchanging a glance with Jason that conveyed the same apprehension. As they drew nearer, the sound of resounding deer calls reached their ears, but Jason sensed an underlying anxiety akin to facing a predator, reminiscent of his encounter with the giant wolf the previous day. They quickened their pace. In the valley, where the elk had established a new habitat, the majority of them were scattered, foraging for food. However, by the stream, a small group of elk gathered around their leader. A weary female elk lay beside them, seemingly the leader's mate. Jason felt a pang of sympathy, having witnessed the elk being driven into a frenzy the day before and now facing the loss of its partner. Yet, his compassion was fleeting, as the elk leader likely had more than one mate. As Jason and his companions approached, the elk leader hesitated momentarily, ultimately emitting a soft call instead of launching an attack. It had caught a whiff of a familiar scent from the previous day. Although it did not understand why 4-legged wolves had transformed into 2-legged ones, its cautious instincts led it to perceive this as a potential trap and to act accordingly. The group observed as the elk parted to create a path, neither fleeing nor attacking, acknowledging their own vulnerability as mere mortals. They stepped forward to examine the condition of the female elk. It was clear she was on the verge of death, yet her body bore no signs of bloodshed. Instead, she appeared utterly drained, as if her very essence had been siphoned away. As the crowd observed, Jason suddenly sensed movement around him, realizing that the assailant was likely still nearby. In an instant, he transformed into a towering black wolf, his extraordinary sense of smell allowing him to roughly pinpoint the attacker's location. He instructed Riel to remain behind, as both elders were merely ordinary humans, and swiftly dashed towards the confirmed sighting. Old Gil, being more experienced, attempted to call Jason back, but it was already too late. The giant wolf had vanished from sight. He turned to Riel and old Harry, exclaiming, "This is bad. It could be a vampire." Upon inspecting the deer's neck, he discovered 2 blood-like puncture wounds resembling fangs. Chapter 10. Confrontation. Though unable to hear old Gil's warning, Jason quickly deduced who had been attacking the herd, having successfully intercepted the escape route of the assailant. Before him stood a strikingly pale young man with crimson eyes, yet Jason instinctively knew that he was no mere human. The scent was all wrong, and he could feel the icy, lifeless body of his adversary. "You are the thief who has been stealing deer." This was an ancestral tactic of intimidation, and Jason became aware that his opponent was indeed a vampire. The 3 elders of the Quileute tribe had previously mentioned the presence of the Cullen family, a group of vampires unlike any other, as they refrained from consuming human blood and instead fed on that of animals. They were a friendly faction, having reached an accord with the Quileute werewolves to coexist peacefully without harming humans. However, this did not mean Jason would allow him to escape easily. Before the vampire could respond, the black wolf unleashed a terrifying force that generated an astonishing gust of wind as he lunged forward. Yet, the vampire was no ordinary foe. Always on guard, he evaded the attack with an extraordinary speed beyond comprehension. Just as he was about to speak, the wolf's claws struck, sending him crashing into a tree. Ignoring the pain, he quickly dashed behind the trunk, but the ferocious wolf's fangs were already upon him, tearing through the wood and producing a satisfying crunch, causing him to flee in panic. Jason, determined not to let him escape, had significantly enhanced his strength the previous night. Typically, he would never exert such force against Riel, but the chance to practice against a vampire was too rare to pass up. The chase ensued, with the 2 engaging in a thrilling game of pursuit and evasion, the vampire narrowly escaping the wolf's claws and jaws through sheer agility. Edward, the vampire, felt quite innocent in the matter. He had risen early, as usual, to hunt for food. After a long search, he stumbled upon a large herd of wild deer. Without a second thought, he captured one for a taste, savoring a hearty meal, only to realize that he was not alone when he sensed the approach of another. Just as he was preparing to slip away unnoticed, he was confronted by a werewolf eager to fight. This wolf was astonishingly fast, rivaling his own speed. After all, vampires were known for their quickness, and among the Cullen family, Edward had always ranked first. To his surprise, he found himself outmatched by Jason. And even more shocking was the failure of his telepathic abilities. A select few vampires possess the ability to awaken their latent talents. Edward's gift of telepathy enables him to read the thoughts of others. Coupled with his speed advantage, this has granted him the upper hand in past confrontations. However, when his innate abilities are countered and his swiftness is rendered ineffective, he finds himself at the mercy of his opponents. It is not a reflection of Edward's strength. Among the Quileute werewolves, his chances of victory in one-on-one combat are likely less than 20% against others of his kind. It is simply a matter of encountering a formidable adversary. Prolonged defense leads to inevitable failure. A minor misstep can trigger a chain reaction. Jason's powerful wolf claw struck Edward squarely in the chest, sending him hurtling through the air, his clothing torn asunder by the force. 3 deep gashes marred his otherwise handsome physique. Although Edward's injuries appeared severe, Jason had refrained from employing his shadow claws. The wolf's claws were blunt by nature, merely grazing the surface. After all, it was merely a stolen deer, and this lesson had been sufficient. With a vampire's regenerative capabilities, the scars would soon vanish, though the internal injuries would require a day or two to heal. Just as Jason was preparing to withdraw, a shadow darted swiftly before him, revealing a strikingly beautiful, short-haired woman. Her pallid complexion and crimson eyes mirrored the urgency of the moment. "Edward, are you all right?" Alice exclaimed upon seeing her fallen brother. Rushing to his side, possessing the rare gift of foresight, she had envisioned Edward's injury that morning and hastened to find him. Upon arriving nearby, she witnessed the aftermath of his defeat. As she glared at him with indignation, Jason began to formulate an explanation, but soon 5 more figures materialized before him. The entire Cullen family had assembled. Although Jason had anticipated encountering the vampire protagonists and Forks, he had not expected to confront them in such a manner. Observing the expressions of the group, it was clear that reconciliation would be elusive. It was not fear that gripped him. Facing so many vampires simultaneously would certainly lead to defeat. Yet, possessing the ability to use shadow steps, escape would not prove difficult. However, a hasty retreat would undoubtedly be rather undignified. In the next moment, he realized that fleeing was unnecessary. The familiar sound of a wolf's howl resonated through the forest. Riel had arrived, accompanied by other clan members. The imposing figure of Riel stood alongside him, their presence equally formidable. The elder Gil had informed the pack early that morning, summoning all werewolves and Forks to gather at the valley of the herded deer. The delay in their departure was due to the elders' pedestrian pace, as well as the fact that the giant wolves needed no guidance. Their scent served as the most effective compass. Riel, having quickly gathered the clan members, left 2 to guard the elders, while he pursued Jason, concerned for his safety. The Quileute werewolves were renowned for their solidarity and protectiveness. Upon hearing of potential danger to their kin, they had immediately followed suit. The atmosphere between the 2 parties was once tense, with Karen and her band of vampires furrowing their brows, for a confrontation would yield no benefit to either side. After regaining his composure, Edward approached the leading vampire, Carlisle, and recounted the events clearly. Noticing the wound on Edward's chest that was beginning to heal, Carlisle realized that restraint had been exercised, and thus he abandoned his intention to engage in battle. "Werewolves, we may have had a misunderstanding," he remarked. This unexpected incident concluded dramatically. Chapter 11. The bonfire. Despite the minor disruption, it did not affect Jason and his companion's subsequent plans. Upon returning to the Valley of the Deer, they shared the details of the encounter with the elders Harry and the pack of werewolves who had transformed back into their human forms. When Jason recounted how he had bested the vampire Edward, the crowd erupted in applause. Although a peace agreement had been established with the Cullen family, the long-standing enmity between werewolves and vampires still lingered, and the news of a vampire's misfortune brought them joy. However, Law wore a concerned expression, indicating his unease. Currently, the new generation of Quileute werewolves and Forks consisted of only 10 individuals. The previous generation had dwindled, with some departing for various reasons and others having perished. Consequently, the elders, Harry and his 2 companions who could not transform, remained in Forks. The first werewolves were Sam and Lyle, who often guided the younger members, providing mutual support and vigilance. However, due to individual lives, they could not frequently gather. This occasion likely marked their most complete assembly yet. with not only Sam and Lyle present but also Lyle's brother Seth, along with other werewolves like Embry, Jared, and Paul. The group of young individuals, aged between 18 and 25, engaged in lively conversation, and witnessing the growth of their kin brought joy to the elders, prompting them to decide on a bonfire gathering at the ranch that evening. Before that, however, they needed to solidify their plans. After touring the valley's deer herd, Jason and Old Harry shared their intentions to establish a breeding company. Raising deer would be merely the beginning, as they could later consider cattle and sheep, with the former's antlers fetching exorbitant prices in the market, while the latter two also held significant economic potential. With the Quileute werewolves as natural herders, the entire forested valley would serve as their pasture. Werewolves, being transformed humans, also require livelihoods. The town had been struggling economically, barely scraping by. But now a promising opportunity had arisen, filling everyone with immense joy. Thus, the Great Deer Ranch was officially founded. Jason contributed over 200 elk, securing 50% ownership, while Lyle claimed 10%. Initially, Jason intended to offer more, but Lyle declined. Old Harry and Jill invested in the ranch, acquiring 30%, while the other werewolves each received 2% shares without transfer rights. The remaining 4% was allocated to Elder Billy, who was absent. With plans to apply for formal registration upon returning to town, Jason unexpectedly ascended to the role of leader. By merely trimming the antlers from the male deer within the herd, he could amass a considerable sum of startup capital. Jason calculated that deer antlers, being a rare and nourishing medicinal material, commanded a market price of approximately $500 per pound. Given that male deer constituted a ratio of 1 to 4 within the herd, and with over 200 deer present, he estimated there might be 1 to 2,000 pounds of antlers available, potentially nearing $1 million. It was no wonder the two elders were so exhilarated. Jason had never encountered such wealth in his 2 lifetimes. Had it not been for the Druidic inheritance and the fragment of divinity he had received, he likely would have been equally elated. However, this fortune was earmarked as the seed capital for the Great Deer Ranch, which he could not personally access. Nonetheless, he had agreed with the 2 elders to assume a hands-off approach, delegating management responsibilities to the 3 elders and Lyre. Beneath the radiant moon and a canopy of stars, the ranch came alive with the glow of a bonfire, its fierce flames sending sparks swirling into the night sky. A whole roasted lamb, exuding a tantalizing aroma, rested beside the fire, with tables laden with sumptuous food and fine wine. Many tribespeople had brought their wives and girlfriends, infusing the gathering with a vibrant atmosphere. Inspired by the lively music, Old Harry took to the floor, teaching everyone the dance of the ancient Quileute tribe, setting the theme of the evening as a celebration. Lyre appeared particularly enchanting that night, adorned in a beautiful dress and with her face delicately made up, instantly attracting the admiration of the onlooking werewolves. Sam, in turn, found himself pleading for mercy as his wife tugged at his ear. Lyre's gaze quickly locked onto her target. She strode confidently towards Jason, disregarding her brother Seth, who was engaged in conversation and revelry, and invited him to join her by the bonfire for a dance. At such a moment, no one could decline, and they soon joined Old Harry's dance line, waving their arms joyfully amidst the roaring flames that illuminated their beaming faces. In ancient times, bonfires symbolized the casting away of the old and the igniting of new hopes. Amidst the dance and cheers, Jason truly began to integrate into this world. Whether it was the unity and mutual support of the Quileute werewolves earlier that morning, or the assistance he received from the 3 elders and Lyre, a palpable sense of mutual recognition blossomed among them. Though Old Harry's Quileute dance would eventually come to an end, the festivities had only just begun. The Quileute tribespeople, known for their robust physiques, soon transformed the gathering into a showcase of talents, with applause and cheers resonating continuously. However, keen observers would note the absence of 2 individuals. This evening, Lyre was notably assertive and passionate. In a secluded corner, Jason and Lyre were lost in each other's embrace, their bodies entwined in a fervent kiss. As Jason fought to maintain the last vestiges of his composure, he gently carried Princess Lyre back to their room, where the atmosphere crackled with intensity, shaking the very ground beneath them. Chapter 12. Returning to school after all that had transpired, Jason stood at the gates of Fortis High School, his emotions a tumultuous blend. This was his second visit to Fortis. The first had been to facilitate his enrollment. In recent days, Jason and Lyre have been inseparable at the ranch. Aside from attending to the company registration, they have essentially spent every moment together. However, a phone call last night disrupted their tranquil existence. It was a call from Jason's father, notifying him that the holiday was over and he was to prepare for school the following day. Jason was enrolling as an 18-year-old transfer student in his senior year. His father insisted that he must attend classes regularly. And even after learning during the call that Jason had successfully awakened his bloodline, he remained steadfast in his decision. Not all family members viewed awakening as beneficial. Some desired a life of normalcy. Jason's father, having awakened himself, chose to suppress his transformation into a giant wolf, gradually forgetting this ability. As a result, despite the complexities of their relationship, Jason acquiesced. He harbored no significant aversion to attending school. He understood that knowledge could alter one's destiny. Although he had embarked on a path of idealism, he recognized the value of materialistic knowledge, believing that all knowledge ultimately converges. The mysteries of the Quileute were perhaps best unraveled through scientific means. As the classroom bell rang, the teacher entered with a handsome young man with short brown hair. If Edward from Twilight was the embodiment of the brooding prince, then Jason represented the archetypal sunny gentleman, with eyes as deep as the ocean, a chiseled nose, and a warm, sun-kissed complexion that captivated the attention of many female classmates. After a brief self-introduction, the teacher instructed Jason to find an empty seat. Upon scanning the room, Jason approached a female classmate and inquired, "Is the seat taken?" "Hello, I'm Bella, and this seat is already occupied," she replied, clearly dismissing him. Unfazed, Jason moved to another vacant spot, which was indeed unoccupied, eliciting excitement from his new desk partner, Jessica, who relished the opportunity. What others did not realize was that Jason was lost in thought. If he was not mistaken, the empty seat belonged to Edward. And what a coincidence it was to encounter him again, truly a case of fate's irony. However, he had chosen that particular seat primarily for its proximity to the window, allowing him to admire the view outside. Then again, Jason pondered how Edward would react to his unexpected presence as a classmate, though he had no intention of targeting anyone. The thought amused him. After years apart, he had not stepped into a classroom for quite some time. Nevertheless, he had been a university student in his past life. And with his current form having reached the bronze tier, his mental acuity far exceeded that of an average person. His enhanced memory allowed him to recall deeply ingrained knowledge with clarity, making it relatively easy for him to keep pace with the curriculum. At this moment, one could say Jason was half a genius, possessing the intellect of a prodigy, but lacking the innate talents and extensive knowledge reserves of one. As for how Jason achieved his breakthrough, it can only be described as a natural progression. His strength had already reached the threshold for advancement. And with the gradual unraveling of his inner turmoil, he was able to open his heart. During this period, Riel's influence was undoubtedly significant, leading him to effortlessly transcend into a novice bronze druid. Although he is merely at the initial bronze level, this distinction marks a clear divide between the mundane and the extraordinary. His physical capabilities have seen a remarkable enhancement, and the seeds of nature within him have finally sprouted into small saplings. The disparity in the forces of nature is akin to the difference between a vast reservoir and a gentle stream. Furthermore, he has awakened 3 inherited skills: the touch of healing, Vine's manipulation, and beast summoning. It can be said that Jason's current prowess is no less formidable than when he first mastered the transformation into a giant wolf. With an overall strength that is even greater, the touch of healing emits waves that can mend the wounds of those he contacts, effortlessly addressing superficial injuries. However, internal injuries are more complex. Perhaps integrating modern medical knowledge would enhance his self-healing capabilities, for reality is not a game. Vine's manipulation allows him to command the tendrils of nature for offensive purposes, as well as to conjure magical thorn vines for attack. The ability to summon beasts permits him to call forth creatures of equivalent power from other realms and to control fierce beasts of nature. To be frank, Jason finds this skill somewhat superfluous. If he cannot defeat a lower-tier bronze beast while transformed into a Quileute wolf, then the local predators are of little use. Nonetheless, after unlocking the bronze druid heritage, he was taken aback by how swiftly he had progressed. The druid's transformation ability derives from bloodline power. In the land of Azeroth, where numerous magical creatures abound, a rich array of beast bloodlines is available for selection. However, Earth is vastly different. While he suspects that magical beasts exist in some hidden corners, locating them in such a vast world poses a significant challenge. Thus, the beast summoning skill offers him a broader reserve of beast bloodlines, with its auxiliary value far exceeding its practical combat application. It will undoubtedly become one of the skills he diligently practices daily, as mastering a skill is a considerable leap from merely learning it. Regardless, Jason's academic journey has commenced. Although he presents himself as a diligent student, most of his thoughts during class are devoted to honing his natural powers. After lessons, he spends his time in the library, seeking out literature on natural biology or human medicine to further his education. After all, having been granted a second chance at life, if immortality is not an option, he would resign himself to being an ordinary person. Yet now that opportunity has arisen, he is determined to seize it with fervor, which explains his willingness to embrace school, fueled by greater ambitions. Chapter 13. Misunderstanding high school life unfolded with a steady rhythm, and Jason's existence began to take on a semblance of routine. He attended classes to cultivate his skills and returned to his ancestral home in Forte's town after school to practice magic. The ranch was no longer his home. Previously, he had lingered there due to his familiarity with the giant wolf form, but he has since perfected his control over the transformation, ensuring he no longer has any excuse to delay. However, Liar frequently spent the night at Jason's home, under the pretext of preventing someone from courting other female students. Whether there were ulterior motives remained a matter of personal interpretation. Jason would smile wryly each time, secretly reveling in the arrangement. Nonetheless, he would return to the ranch on weekends to lend a hand. For having resolved to establish the ranch, he was determined to make it a success. In this endeavor, his newly acquired ability to summon beasts proved immensely beneficial, as he even managed to command a small pack of wolves nearby. This control over the wolves facilitated both herding and protection against wild animals attacking the deer, requiring only scraps of meat and bones, which the ranch could readily provide. The wild deer, still untamed, had migratory habits that made them challenging to manage, and the presence of the wolf pack alleviated their workload, allowing Old Harry and his team to allocate more hands towards developing the new ranch. However, Jason was taken aback by Edward's absence from class for nearly a week. Just as he was about to dismiss the matter from his mind, Edward reappeared. Upon seeing Jason in the classroom, he resembled a startled cat. For the memory of their last encounter lingered vividly in his mind. Although he hadn't sustained serious injuries, it had taken him 3 days to recover. Edward hastily approached Bella, grasped her hand, and together they exited the classroom, unwilling to leave his girlfriend in such a perilous setting. Throughout this, he was anxious that Jason might take action, keeping a vigilant eye on him. Jason noticed Edward's tense demeanor, which nearly elicited a laugh from him. Yet, he felt powerless. He could hardly approach Edward to say, "It's a coincidence. It's merely a coincidence. Trust me." Thus, he resigned himself to let them think what they wished, focusing instead on his own affairs. The consequence of this was that Jason found himself cornered at the pathway after school. As he traversed a street alone, Edward, accompanied by his sister Alice and brother Jasper, sought him out. After all, it was rather peculiar for a vampire to approach Jason. It was uncertain whether it was to hold him accountable or merely to deliver a message, hence he decisively chose to bring company. "Why are you at Forte's High School? What is your purpose?" Edward's anger surged upon seeing Jason's calm visage, yet he subdued it, recalling the purpose of his visit. Noticing that Edward had no immediate intention to act violently, Jason felt relieved. After all, this was the town, and it would be ill-advised to unleash his full power, especially his ability to transform into a giant wolf, should an ordinary person witness it, with potentially significant repercussions. What else would I be doing at school? Of course, I'm here to attend classes. Or should I be courting girls? I almost forgot. There are indeed people who come to school for that purpose. Jason's flippant tone further incited Edward's ire, and had Alice not restrained him, he might have acted impulsively. Jason relished the feeling of provoking an opponent who was infuriated yet hesitant to retaliate. However, he also recognized the futility of entangling himself with them any further, for his primary focus remained on enhancing his own strength. Therefore, he resolved to leave directly. Upon witnessing the scene, Edward instinctively reached out to intervene. Yet at the moment his hand was about to make contact with Jason, the latter vanished into thin air. The sudden loss of balance nearly caused Edward to topple over. In the blink of an eye, Jason reappeared behind him, leaving Alice, who stood nearby, utterly astonished. Her extraordinary eyesight failed to discern Jason's movements, as if he had simply disappeared and then materialized anew. In a state of heightened anxiety, Alice instinctively activated her gift of foresight, hoping to glimpse the future. However, all she perceived was a shroud of mist, obscuring any potential trajectory of events. This was an unprecedented experience for her, ever since her awakening. She had been able to foresee fragments of the future, regardless of the individual involved. This ability had proven immensely advantageous, allowing her to anticipate Edward's imminent mishap. Yet, it rendered her existence devoid of surprise, as if trapped in an interminable cycle of time, akin to completing preordained tasks in a game. However, like all humans, she possessed a temperament. She had attempted to disregard her visions of the future, yet the outcomes were often even more unbearable. Thus, at that moment, Jason left a profound impression on her. Jasper, too, had come to his senses and assumed a defensive posture, though Jason showed no inclination to engage. "Rest assured, as long as you adhere to our agreement, I have no intention of violating the pact between our two clans," Jason declared before striding confidently between Alice and Jasper, making his exit and leaving the 3 stunned vampires behind. It is noteworthy that throughout history, vampires had consistently excelled in one-on-one confrontations against werewolves, owing to their exceptional innate abilities. In contrast, werewolves thrived on teamwork, their telepathic communication allowing for unparalleled coordination. However, this time, the werewolf presented a curious anomaly. Not only was he formidable in strength, but he also possessed an immunity to mental abilities, exhibiting an eerily unique skill set even in his untransformed state. Fortunately, they understood that not every werewolf was endowed with such traits. They could only regard Jason as an extraordinary individual. Chapter 14. The Flickering Hound. After shaking off the 3 persistent vampires, Jason hummed a cheerful tune as he made his way home. Although Edward and his companions had attempted to obstruct his path, he was acutely aware that a confrontation was impossible, not merely due to the peace agreement between their two families, but also because vampire laws prohibited their kind from appearing in the presence of ordinary humans. Thus, should Edward and his associates choose to engage, they would not do so in a populated town. In fact, Jason suspected that this encounter might have been a test by the Cullen family. The existence of 2 mysterious races, a werewolf clan and a vampire lineage, within a single town was quite intriguing, especially given their historical enmity. The Quileute werewolf clan, a native lineage, had experienced a decline for unspecified reasons, but had recently begun to resurge. Conversely, the Cullen family had perpetually dwelled in a migratory state, their relocation to Forks potentially harboring ulterior motives. Carlyle breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the account of the events from his son Edward and his companions. As the patriarch of the Cullen family, he was constantly preoccupied with the safety and well-being of his clan. Edward's encounter with Jason was a deliberate decision on Carlyle's part, as he sought to ascertain whether the newly emerged werewolves of the Quileute tribe harbored any hostility towards them. After all, their migration was prompted by the threats posed by the Volturi family, who had been eyeing his children, Edward and Alice, for their extraordinary talents, hoping to manipulate them for their own ends. Forks, being the stronghold of the Quileute werewolves, presented a unique situation. Although the Volturi family ranked among the most formidable vampire clans, their influence had yet to extend into this territory. Even if they were aware of their presence, they would likely tread carefully. However, should the werewolves display any animosity, another relocation might become necessary. While Jason sensed an air of intrigue surrounding the situation, he did not dwell on it deeply. Forks was a small town, and any disturbances would hardly escape the notice of the Quileute werewolves. Moreover, as Jason's prowess grew, he believed that many challenges would soon become manageable. Thus, for the time being, he prioritized the enhancement of his abilities. Upon returning home, Jason slipped into the basement. Such villa-style residences typically featured a subterranean level. Once he discovered the basement, he devoted considerable effort to reorganizing the space, especially since living in a town did not afford the same convenience as a ranch, where open, uninhabited expanses were commonplace. After transforming the vacant basement into a sanctuary for his magical studies and training, he immersed himself in the complexities of the 3 inherited magical disciplines, each with its unique intricacies. For instance, the summoning of beasts allowed for targeted invocation. He had once called forth a flock of distant birds in a desolate wilderness, which danced around him in a flurry, and had also led a pack of summoned wolves on a hunt in the wild. However, he had yet to experiment with interdimensional summoning, a practice fraught with risk due to its random nature. Certain ferocious beasts and hellish demons might disregard the magical contract, resulting in immediate conflict upon arrival. Thus, interdimensional summoning necessitated specific magical circles to facilitate the process, serving as a crucial defensive measure when needed. Currently, Jason was sketching a basic thorn magic circle in the basement, a recent endeavor. Its advantages lay in the absence of required magical materials, making it user-friendly with Jason at its core. Nonetheless, its lethality was moderate, primarily designed to ensnare foes rather than eliminate them. After a flurry of activity, Jason finally completed the preliminary preparations and began to cast the summoning spell. In an instant, the basement stirred with an unnatural wind, causing his garments to flutter wildly. The magical circle materialized, and before long, a large white dog, resembling a young colt, emerged. From the summoning contract, he discerned that it was a shimmering dog. Although the Flickering Hound is merely a low-level bronze-tier magical beast, it possesses an exceedingly rare talent known as Flicker, which allows for short-range spatial jumps. This is a coveted trait among many mages. Jason, to his surprise, summoned such a rare creature on his very first attempt at summoning magic. Perhaps due to Jason being a druid, the Flickering Hound wagged its tail and approached him, licking his palm in a display of friendliness. Despite the overlap between the hound's talent and the ability of Shadow Step, Jason decided to forge a summoning contract with it. The summoning contract of druids is not a coercive one. The contracted magical beasts can be summoned at will, although if they are to partake in combat, some form of compensation is required afterward, akin to a hiring arrangement. Moreover, Many magical beasts possess intelligence comparable to that of humans, and if they find themselves unable to defeat an enemy, they may very well flee. As Jason stroked the flickering hound's head and experienced its flicker ability, he decided to reverse summon it back, considering that the basement was rather confined. In the future, he could summon it frequently on the ranch to foster their bond and understanding, ultimately enhancing its effectiveness in battle. After this series of actions, he noticed that his natural energy had dwindled quickly, consuming about 1/3 of his magical power. Once he resumed his meditative state to replenish his natural energy, he intended to continue his summoning attempts. In a certain foul-smelling underground palace, a group of humans intruded unexpectedly, disturbing the life of a six-winged, iron-backed centipede and even threatening its progeny. Although those were merely its stored provisions, the centipede, enraged, resolved to eliminate these invaders, who were utterly ignorant of its power. While a few of the intruders were somewhat bothersome, they were no match for its overwhelming strength. They fell easily, sustaining injuries in the process. As it toyed with them, preparing to conclude this game, an unforeseen mysterious force selected it and drew it into the void, making it vanish from sight, leaving the group in stunned silence. The leader inquired, "What just happened? Where has the six-winged centipede gone?" A woman in red, struggling to rise, replied, "I don't know what happened. We nearly met our end here. Let us retreat quickly." The leading man hastily guided his companions away, as if pursued by unseen phantoms, and tranquility gradually returned to the underground palace. Chapter 15. The six-winged iron-backed centipede. The summoning array transformed the ethereal into the tangible, and a six-winged iron-backed centipede appeared, still poised to attack, taken aback by its sudden change of location. Its initial shock quickly morphed into fury, feeling betrayed by humans. It let out a furious roar directed at the ceiling, spotting a human before it. It resolved to eliminate this one first, then seek out the others who dared to mock it, ensuring they would all feel its wrath. For Jason, encountering such a massive centipede for the first time was somewhat daunting. The feedback from the summoning contract indicated that it was a superior magical beast of the bronze tier. With its innate talent of Ironback, even in his transformed state as a Quileute wolf, he might not easily subdue it. Although the odds were in his favor, he understood that victory would inevitably come at a price. As the six-winged iron-backed centipede loomed closer, its massive form generated a wind pressure that made it difficult to keep one's eyes open. The unmistakable aura of this savage beast was palpable, even armed with firearms. An ordinary person would stand no chance against such a formidable creature. The innate abilities of the iron-backed centipede rendered it akin to a moving fortress, clad in impenetrable armor that ordinary weaponry could scarcely pierce, inflicting at most only superficial wounds. However, as the centipede was but a meter away from Jason, it suddenly came to an abrupt halt, not out of any newfound compassion. Unbeknownst to him, the magical array beneath the centipede had been activated, causing several emerald-hued magical thorns to erupt from the ground, swiftly entangling its lower body and rendering it immobile. Almost immediately, additional magical vines shot forth to ensnare its upper body as well. For a moment, the six-winged iron-backed centipede thrashed violently, its eerie, shrill cries sending shivers down Jason's spine. Fortunately, the basement's soundproofing was decent. Explaining the noise to the nearby residents would be quite a challenge. The beast's strength was formidable, yet the magical array summoned not ordinary vines, but those imbued with the power of nature, making escape a daunting task. It seemed the centipede had come to the realization that breaking free was futile. Its elongated fangs began to writhe, as if preparing to unleash something venomous. Within its body lay a venom sac capable of expelling a lethal mist when necessary, a tactic it had employed to turn the tide against formidable foes in the past. Yet, Jason had sensed its intentions. Before the creature could act, a thicker thorny vine ensnared its mandibles, effectively eliminating any chance of escape. Drawing upon the knowledge inscribed in the summoning contract, Jason was well aware of this particular ability and remained resolute in his strategy. He invoked his control over the vines, summoning a magical whip that lashed out at the centipede. Seizing this rare opportunity, he sought to test the potency of other spells. The whip struck against the creature's hardened shell with a resounding clang, leaving only faint white impressions, a testament to its terrifying defensive capabilities. However, the centipede's underbelly remained its Achilles heel. The whip strikes there left deep crimson marks, eliciting even more desperate and anguished cries from the six-winged centipede. After gauging the efficacy of this spell, Jason quickly ceased his assault. The magical array was centered around him, and all energy expended was drawn from his own reserves. He could feel the natural power within him dwindling, now less than a quarter of its original strength. The consumption of natural energy was considerable, and he realized he needed to dispatch this beast swiftly. Without the array's aid, a depleted Jason might not stand a fighting chance against it. Initially hesitant about slaying the creature, Jason found his resolve firm. His deep brown eyes hardened with determination as he transformed into a colossal black wolf. Although Jason had primarily honed his mastery over natural energy, the lineage of the Quileute magical wolf surged within him, advancing rapidly, especially following his talent awakening. Now, he towered larger than even Riel, his stature akin to that of a Mongolian horse, more majestic than before. The colossal wolf coalesced its increasingly adept shadow claws, which measured nearly 70 centimeters in length, effortlessly piercing through the soft abdomen of the six-winged iron-backed centipede. This strike not only left a significant dent in its abdomen but also dislodged the centipede's core essence. Despite the centipede's formidable vitality, which allowed it to endure even after sustaining severe damage, the loss of its core essence rendered the six-winged iron-backed centipede akin to a lifeless automaton, gradually ceasing its struggles. Thus, the once dominant six-winged iron-backed centipede met its demise. In a distant subterranean chamber, a group of individuals awaited its return, and upon discovering that the fearsome beast had vanished entirely, they cautiously re-entered the dungeon, uncertain whether this turn of events heralded fortune or misfortune. Reverse summoning necessitates that the magical beast does not resist for it to take effect. Hence, Jason resolutely dispatched the beast, driven not only by the desire for its materials but also by practical necessity. The six-winged iron-backed centipede possessed several harvestable components, such as its venom sacs, carapace, and the freshly acquired core essence, all of which were valuable resources. Notably, the core essence contained pure life energy, capable of accelerating the cultivation of the colossal wolf's bloodline power. The other materials could serve as offerings for summoning rituals or as compensation for summons. Although he had yet to devise a concrete plan for their utilization, he resolved to collect them and bury the unusable remnants in the hillside to serve as fertilizer. After a flurry of activity, Jason realized he had yet to dine, prompting a rueful smile. He was too exhausted to prepare a proper meal and would have to settle for instant noodles. Had Lyre been present, she would have prepared dinner in advance. Yet knowing she would not be joining him tonight, Jason chose to practice his summoning techniques instead. There were certain secrets he preferred to keep under wraps for the time being. Perhaps, if he found a suitable rationale, he might reveal a portion of his abilities, such as his bloodline talent and magic, as these would undoubtedly be useful in the future. However, he would never disclose the matter of the divine fragment to anyone. After all, this world was far from simple, teeming with formidable and awe-inspiring entities. Chapter 16. Billy time passed amidst the hustle and bustle, and Jason experienced a sensation reminiscent of his school days, with a structured routine of classes and study. Each day, he immersed himself in the cultivation of natural forces and concentrated on two primary subjects, natural science and human medicine. He believed these disciplines would significantly aid him on the path of the Druid. Although he had inherited the Druidic legacy, he was acutely aware that he only grasped the application of magic without understanding its underlying principles, much like a driver who knows how to operate a vehicle but lacks knowledge of its construction. For an ordinary person, this distinction might be inconsequential, but for Jason, aspiring to reach greater heights necessitated a comprehensive understanding of the power he wielded. Natural science and human medicine might very well hold the keys to unlocking that door. The ultimate goal of magic was science, and he considered using scientific explanations for magic to be one of the most effective methods. However, this required him to establish a foundation in the realm of science and to personally explore its mysteries. He had no trust in relying on others. Having witnessed the fate of Ant-Man in the Avengers, in this capitalist society, betrayal and treachery were rampant. Regardless, he has ample time. As a child of nature, the Druid ranks among the longest-lived of the extraordinary professions. Coupled with the Druid's inherent extraordinary intelligence, he is unlikely to be inferior to other prodigies. However, today brought an unexpected visitor to his home. Upon opening the door, he was greeted by a young man pushing a wheelchair. And in that wheelchair sat Elder Billy of the Quileute tribe, whom he had encountered previously, due to an ailment affecting his legs. Elder Billy was no longer able to walk normally, which explained the limited encounters they had at the ranch. The one pushing him was his son, Jacob, a legendary figure in the werewolf community who had once fought with Edward for a girlfriend and later became Edward's brother-in-law. At this moment, however, Jacob had yet to officially awaken his bloodline. Welcoming the two, Jason proactively led them into the living room. Although Riel typically managed the intricate affairs of the ranch, she happened to be home today and was pleasantly surprised to see them, given that, strictly speaking, they shared a distant familial bond. According to Riel, Jacob was her cousin, of similar age, and they had played together in the mud since childhood. For the moment, the atmosphere was not awkward. However, Elder Billy clearly had matters weighing on his mind. Before Jason could speak, he took the initiative to explain the purpose of their visit. His friend Charlie, an officer in Fortay's town, had mentioned some strange murders occurring nearby, which piqued Billy's concern. fearing that Charlie might be dealing with something out of the ordinary. He sought out Jason. As for why he did not approach other werewolves, that could be attributed to Jason, for he had established the Great Deer Ranch, drawing most of the werewolves from Forte's town to work there, where the salaries and benefits far surpassed those in town, along with profit sharing. The working environment also aligned better with their nature. Though Riel exhibited a tender and affectionate side towards Jason, she harbored the inherent ambition of a wolf. Having once declared her desire to become the largest ranch owner in America, Elder Billy and Jacob had no intention of staying for dinner. They were in and out in a hurry. Jason readily agreed to investigate the peculiar murders in town, as Forte's town was considered the territory of the Quileute werewolves. If the cases turned out to be those of ordinary citizens, he would refrain from intervening. However, if it were indeed an incursion by other extraordinary beings, such an affront would not be taken lightly. He would retaliate fiercely, for it would not only tarnish his reputation but also that of the entire Quileute tribe within the realm of the extraordinary. Nonetheless, Jason was not in a rush. As Riel was still present that night, although she remained silent while Elder Billy spoke, it was evident she was concerned for Jason after they left, even planning to stay a few days to assist. However, Jason dissuaded her, considering the ranch was in a phase of rapid development, with old Harry and old Jill aging. Many matters required her direct oversight. As one of the key managers, her sudden absence for several days would be untenable. Clearly, Riel was not easily placated. While Jason was bathing, she unexpectedly barged in. Upon seeing the alluring beauty wrapped only in a towel, Jason couldn't help but smile mischievously. Before Jason could finish his sentence, his body became ensnared as if by a gigantic python, and his mouth was sealed by a fervent kiss. The scene shifts to a riverbank in Fortis town, where a fishing boat has just docked. The man aboard appears to have had a bountiful catch today, his face adorned with a beard yet revealing a subtle smile. Suddenly, a strange sound arises, reminiscent of some creature swiftly traversing the jungle. The man glances back towards the shore, finding nothing amiss, and resumes his tasks. However, moments later, another sound emanates from the bank, startling him. He turns to discover a sultry and alluring beauty who has mysteriously appeared by the water's edge. Yet her gaze is peculiar, as if she regards him as prey. Unperturbed, the man remains entranced, his expression dazed. The crimson hue of her eyes betrays her non-human nature. She is Victoria, the matriarch of the vampire clan. At that moment, two more vampires join her, James, bare-chested, and Laurent, the last to arrive. The clan is a nomadic vampire family, true carnivorous predators who feast solely on human blood, embodying the very essence of vampires. They seldom linger in one place, moving on once they have wreaked havoc to evade detection by humans. It is evident that these three vampires are out on a hunting expedition, and with a scream, the fate of the man aboard the boat becomes tragically clear. Chapter 17. The Hunt for Vampires. The following morning, Jason returned to school, where he overheard many classmates discussing the recent murder in the town. Fortis town, being relatively small, allowed news to spread with remarkable speed, and numerous students had been warned by their parents to refrain from venturing out at night. This admonition sparked considerable dissent among the rebellious youths, who had just entered their adolescent years. Upon re-entering the classroom, Jason was drawn into a conversation with his desk mate, Jessica. To his chagrin, although she spoke with evident nervousness, her excitement about the topic was unmistakable. Perhaps due to the lack of entertainment in their surroundings, any occurrence seemed to ignite interest. Seizing the opportunity to gather useful information, Jason refrained from interrupting. At that moment, another classmate, Eric, joined the discourse. Eric often prided himself on being well-informed and possessed a keen sense for news. Jason had even jokingly suggested he would make an excellent paparazzo. Eric cryptically announced, "Let me share something you absolutely do not know. This morning, another victim has emerged, the fisherman Jack from the riverside. It is said he met a gruesome end. His head twisted off aboard his own vessel." Jessica gasped in fright and playfully struck Eric, convinced he was jesting. "Don't scare me like that," she exclaimed. And the two exited while playfully bantering. However, Jason did not believe Eric was fabricating the tale, for he could sense the sincerity in his words. Yet, he found himself intrigued by how Eric had come to learn of this grim news. Jason found some time to investigate and learned that Eric's cousin was also a police officer in Fortis town. Initially, he merely intended to caution his cousin to exercise caution. But to his surprise, Eric promptly shared this information with others. Given the recent events, he could hardly concentrate on his lessons. After a prolonged wait for the class to conclude, he set off towards the crime scene by the Fortis River. The roar of his motorcycle echoed as he rode a silver Harley-Davidson, a recent acquisition from a second-hand market. Originally, the owner had purchased it for collection and rarely used it. Jason was immediately drawn to it, although the unpleasant odor inside the vehicle was quite off-putting to his sensitive nose. The allure of American Harley culture made his return to campus on this motorcycle a striking spectacle, prompting him to secure an advance on his funds from the giant deer ranch. As he navigated the rural roads, the scenery whizzed past, and he soon reached his destination. By this time, evening was approaching, and a perimeter had been established at the crime scene by the riverside. The victim had been attended to. Yet 2 officers remained on guard to prevent any tampering with the scene. With fishing prohibited in the river, a number of fishermen had gathered on the banks to discuss the incident. Jason merely observed the situation from the shore, his keen eyesight allowing him to discern much about the scene aboard the boat. He ambled closer to the group engaged in conversation, hoping to glean useful information. One fisherman, tall and lean, lamented, "Jack was murdered out of vengeance. We were just drinking together a few days ago. What do you think happened?" Another companion, clearly agitated, countered, his eyes betraying a hint of fear. "It was the river monster. I saw Jack's body this morning. It was all withered, as if drained of blood. It must be the legendary water beast." Each individual had their own theories, yet unbeknownst to them, Jason was attentively absorbing their words. The deceased's body appeared emaciated, with a neck twisted by immense force, yet there were minimal traces of blood on the boat, an evident anomaly that suggested involvement of a supernatural being, potentially a vampire. As for the legendary water monster, every river seems to harbor such tales, making it impossible to draw conclusions. Unfortunately, the heavy rain from the previous night had washed away much of the scent at the scene, hindering any tracking efforts. After leaving the riverbank, darkness was swiftly approaching. As he watched the sun's final rays, Jason, constrained by limited leads, decided to return to Fortistown to examine another crime scene for additional clues. Meanwhile, at an abandoned factory on the outskirts of Fortistown, a chase was underway. Officer Charlie was leading a search operation, leveraging his familiarity with the surroundings to swiftly uncover some clues and trace the vampire's temporary hideout. However, during the encirclement, the suspects managed to escape rapidly, leaving only the fleeting sight of their retreating figures disappearing into the thicket. Angry Officer Charlie nearly shattered the beeper in his hands, yet one cannot entirely blame him. The speed with which he located the target attested to his considerable experience. However, due to a disparity in information, he failed to consider that his adversaries were not mere humans. The trio of vampires led by Victoria orchestrated the retreat of their group. Among them, the vampire James repeatedly contemplated turning back to exact vengeance on a few humans, feeling an immense sense of humiliation, as they had previously hunted humans but were now being pursued by them. Nonetheless, the seasoned Victoria, with her adeptness, restrained him. Human firearms were not without their dangers for them, and the Vampire Act prohibited their kind from revealing themselves to humans. Should the elders of the Vampire Council become aware of any transgressions, they would undoubtedly be hunted to the ends of the earth. Yet, Victoria was not without her preparations. She had long been accustomed to leaving a backup plan. Ultimately, the 3 vampires found refuge in an unoccupied residence on the outskirts of the town, a location Victoria had carefully researched, knowing that the owner would be away for an extended period. With a smug smile, Victoria remarked to her fellow vampires that foolish humans would never suspect their return to the town, at least for the time being, and they would wait a while before venturing out to hunt again. Unbeknownst to her, another complication was approaching from outside. Jason had gone to another crime scene, where he found scant clues and had decided to return home. However, on his way, he detected a scent that bore a slight resemblance to that of the first crime scene, prompting him to follow the trail. Chapter 18. Nighttime Battle, in the which Jason stealthily peered through a narrow gap in the window, observing the conversation among the vampires inside. He had expected to return empty-handed. Yet by a twist of fate, he had stumbled upon the key figures in this case. However, it was he who possessed the shadow step ability, a skill of concealment. Were he an ordinary person, proximity to them would have revealed their presence, as was the case with the police force of Fortistown. At that moment, it was as if the night enveloped him in a protective veil. Jason's form gradually faded, leaving behind only a faint, elusive shadow as he quietly lurked outside the residence. Although his shadow step ability was currently limited to 70% of its full potential in its corporeal form, its capacity for silent concealment was nonetheless astonishing. Unbeknownst to the clan family outside, the atmosphere of their ongoing conversation grew increasingly animated. Their arrival in Fortistown was not merely a simple act of wandering. They harbored deeper secrets. The clan family, being a vampire lineage, had more members than just the 3 present. However, a betrayal had led to the demise and departure of many within their ranks. As the leader of the clan family, Victoria gritted her teeth at the mention of this betrayal. Jasper of the Karen family was one of the vampires she had been reborn as and was also among those who had defected. Upon learning of a potential lead suggesting his presence in Fortistown, Victoria promptly led James and Laurent to pursue him. Traitors are despised by all organizations. However, Jasper's defection has not deterred Victoria, who is determined to reclaim him as a confidant, given that he was once her right-hand man. This decision has incited considerable dissent from James and Laurent, both of whom are intent on eliminating Jasper. As the three vampires engaged in a heated dispute over the matter, James suddenly furrowed his brow, detecting an unusual scent in the air. He gestured for the other two vampires to cease their argument. Something is amiss. There is someone nearby. The three seasoned vampires swiftly reacted, skillfully dispersing around the house before converging on the location identified by James. However, upon regrouping at the corner of the house, they found no one present. Victoria glanced at James and remarked, "Are you certain? There is no one here." James crouched down to inspect the ground, asserting, "No. Someone has indeed been here. The soil's varying depths are evident, and the temperature fluctuations indicate that they have only just departed prior to his transformation into a vampire." James was a formidable hunter, and his innate talents had only been heightened following his change, particularly in tracking. Were Jason to hear James's analysis, he would undoubtedly nod in agreement, for this was precisely the spot where he had recently hidden. At this moment, Jason was drenched in cold sweat. The sudden silence in the house had raised his alertness, leading him to realize something was amiss. Utilizing his shadow-walking ability, he vacated the area. Observing the vampires forming a perimeter from a distance, he recognized that he had been discovered and regretted his lack of experience. His overconfidence had led him to underestimate other extraordinary beings. After evading the encirclement, he did not immediately return home but instead ventured deeper into the forest. Judging by the opponent's skilled maneuvers, it was clear that the three vampires of the Cran family possessed formidable strength, likely at the advanced bronze tier. Confronting them alone posed a significant risk. Gathering other werewolves to reclaim his dignity was the prudent course of action. Why engage in a solitary battle when one could leverage their own strength in numbers? However, events did not unfold as Jason had hoped. Upon hearing the rapid footfalls approaching from the jungle, he realized that a confrontation was now inevitable. Accepting this fate, he halted his retreat, quietly awaiting his adversaries. For he understood that fleeing from beasts in the wild was the most foolish of choices. This was also his first encounter with such a formidable opponent, igniting within him a desire to engage in a contest. It was not long before three figures swiftly halted before Jason, their expressions twisted into mocking smiles. The dark and sanguine aura of the vampires unabashedly on display. Victoria, the lead vampire, taunted, "Who are you?" "You must be the murderers plaguing the town recently," Jason retorted, his response deliberately evasive. This provocation evidently enraged James, whose expression hardened as he prepared to strike, intent on teaching this human a lesson. The average speed of a vampire's burst is nearly 170 kilometers per hour, a velocity that allows them to close in on Jason in the blink of an eye. For context, the fastest land creature, the cheetah, achieves a speed of only 110 kilometers per hour, which underscores the terrifying nature of these extraordinary beings. Their astonishing speed grants them unparalleled agility, enabling them to maneuver effortlessly against any adversary. However, this time, James was unprepared to encounter another being of equal terrifying prowess. As James launched his attack, Jason did not retreat. Instead, he transformed into a massive black wolf with even greater swiftness, charging forward with remarkable speed. In an instant, the two collided, and the formidable wolf, leveraging its sheer strength and size, overpowered the vampire, pinning him to the ground. The wolf's enormous fangs were poised to strike James's head. Vampires possess two critical weaknesses, their heads and fire. A successful hit could spell instant death. Yet James, being a vampire of considerable combat experience, summoned every ounce of his strength to evade the lethal bite, feeling the painful crack of two ribs within him. Ultimately, the wolf's jaws only grazed his left shoulder. Although it did not strike a fatal blow, Jason felt a twinge of regret for missing the target. The force of the bite was still tremendous, akin to severing the arm of his foe. At that moment, two other vampires sprang into action. Victoria swiftly collided with the black wolf, preventing Jason from launching a second assault. While she had saved James, his shoulder hung limply, indicating that his combat capabilities had been significantly diminished. Vampires possess an extraordinary regenerative ability, but this injury ensured that he could not expect a swift recovery in this battle. This was precisely Jason's intent in his earlier provocation. Laurent seized the opportunity while Jason was momentarily distracted, but unfortunately, Jason evaded the attack with a shadowy leap. The vampire's claws tore through a nearby tree, and although the sudden disappearance of his enemy startled him, a primal sense of danger compelled him to lunge forward quickly, narrowly avoiding Jason's shadowy talons, which left 3 deep gashes across his back. As Jason considered pursuing his advantage, Victoria had already regrouped with the injured James and Laurent, forming a triangular formation to confront him. Observing the vampire's expressions, which mirrored that of individuals facing a formidable threat, Jason realized that their hope of overcoming him was slim. Despite one being gravely wounded and the other lightly injured, such injuries are irreversible for humans, yet for vampires, they remain capable of continuing the fight. You vampires have crossed a line. Fortis Town has always been the domain of the Quileute werewolves, Jason declared, his presence commanding. Victoria, having lost her earlier bravado in the face of the Black Wolf, scowled at Jason and quickly led her companions in retreat, while Jason had no intention of pursuing them. Chapter 19. Exile. Once the vampires had retreated, Jason cast a regretful glance at the torn fabric strewn across the ground, his newly purchased attire, now irrevocably lost. The law of the jungle, where the weak are preyed upon by the strong, has long prevailed in this land. However, it manifests with greater ferocity among extraordinary races compared to the ordinary human beings cloaked in the garb of civilization. The weaker often find themselves oppressed by the stronger, yet, when their strengths are evenly matched, both parties tend to exercise greater caution after initial exchanges. Had Jason been presented with an opportunity to eliminate the vampires, he would not have hesitated. Nonetheless, lacking the assurance of defeating them entirely, he chose to refrain from further confrontation. However, he did not intend to let them off easily. Upon returning to the Great Deer Ranch, Jason gathered everyone together. The Quileute werewolves had largely come to accept him, as few could resist the allure of a leader who guides his kin towards prosperity. Yet mere wealth was insufficient. The Quileute tribe revered strength above all. Jason had engaged in sparring with the werewolves, most of whom were fledgling members. Apart from Sam and Riel, who had attained the advanced bronze tier. The rest were mostly intermediate bronze tier, with 2 recent awakenings at the lower bronze tier, none of whom could match his prowess. Even the elders, Harry and Jill, tacitly acknowledged him as the new chieftain of the Quileute tribe, granting him a certain degree of influence as he recounted the details of the investigation. Upon hearing that vampires had been killing in the town, the young werewolves were incensed. However, upon learning that Jason had wounded and driven off 3 advanced bronze vampires, their anger transformed into admiration for him. After elucidating the events, Jason instructed Sam to lead 5 tribesmen to the town to either eliminate or drive off the vampires, preventing them from causing further disturbances. Meanwhile, the trio of vampires, wary of venturing into the town, chose instead to recuperate at an abandoned campsite in the wilderness. Lawrence's wounds had nearly healed, yet James's left arm, shattered by a bite, would take considerable time to mend, leading him to curse Jason vehemently. However, their refuge was soon discovered by the werewolves, who, drawn by the scent, emerged from the underbrush like a pack of colossal wolves. The sight sent a shiver down James's spine, and the 2 sides soon engaged in a brief yet intense confrontation. Although this pack of wolves appeared somewhat weaker than the previous Black Wolf, injuries and fear compelled them to flee. During the fray, James, already wounded, became the primary target of the werewolves. Had it not been for the desperate protection from Victoria and Laurent, he would have been torn apart. Nevertheless, this encounter left both vampires with numerous injuries, and it wasn't until they escaped the borders of Fortis Town that the young werewolves ceased their pursuit. At this juncture, Jason and Riel lingered for a moment before returning to Fortis Town to await developments. As for why Jason refrained from personally pursuing the vampire trio, he wished to afford the werewolves an opportunity for growth. In his view, the young Quileute werewolves remained too inexperienced. This was understandable, given that they were all fledgling werewolves, primarily engaging in playful skirmishes amongst themselves. It was time for them to broaden their horizons, with Sam leading the charge and the werewolves' formidable cooperative combat abilities. Jason believed they would fare well against 3 vampires, one of whom was injured. Jason's observations were remarkably astute. Although the werewolves maintained a firm grip over the trio of vampires, they still sustained minor injuries. Nonetheless, the collective exhilaration over their impending victory was palpable. However, one individual remained notably subdued throughout the ordeal, Sam, the leader of the group. He had anticipated a straightforward triumph, only to find that the vampires had managed to escape. There is a saying, without comparison, there can be no pain. It was only after engaging in battle with the vampires that he realized just how formidable Jason was, capable of repelling 3 foes simultaneously. In this confrontation, driven by the urgency to vanquish their adversaries, Sam found himself vulnerable as the vampires seized the opportunity to inflict a deep gash across his face. Despite his attempts to retaliate, the vampires skillfully countered his every move, clearly demonstrating their superior prowess. Upon reuniting with the others, Jason quickly sensed the shift in Sam's demeanor. Without uttering a word, he placed a reassuring hand on Sam's shoulder, and they exchanged a knowing smile. Understanding Jason's unspoken sentiment, Sam reciprocated with a foolish grin, dissipating any potential misunderstandings, such as the simplicity of men. Leading the group back to the ranch amidst joyous cheers, the hour had grown late, but the excitement compelled them to host a modest celebration. Even the usually stern elders observed the tribe's burgeoning hope with satisfaction, refraining from opposition. They celebrated not only the expulsion of the invaders, but also the werewolves' demonstration of their strength, akin to lions, and the emergence of a new leader. Seated in the position of honor, Jason felt the sincere affection of his kin, which brought him joy yet intensified the weight of responsibility upon his shoulders. At that moment, a mysterious force surged from within him. The already vibrant essence of his bloodline began to boil, unleashing a powerful wave of heat that coursed through his body, leaving him in excruciating pain as his skin flushed a deep crimson. The sudden transformation rendered his companions, including Riel, momentarily helpless. It was Elder Gil who recalled an ancient legend. According to the lore of the Quileute werewolves, when the leader of the wolf clan is wholly embraced by his people, the primal alpha wolf bloodline undergoes a metamorphosis, elevating him to the status of the true wolf king. The agonizing torment Jason experienced was overwhelming, culminating in a thunderous roar as he morphed into a colossal black wolf. The power of his bloodline constantly reshaped his form, making him larger and his fur more dense. Ultimately, the towering wolf, howling towards the heavens, reached a stature comparable to that of a large rhinoceros, standing 2 meters tall. Externally, he bore little difference from before, save for an added magnificence. A crescent mark upon his forehead bestowed a sacred aura upon him. The alpha magic wolf, now of silver-grade strength, attained a new talent, bloodline source, Eclipse. Chapter 20. The power of moonlight. The alpha giant wolf is the very source of the Quileute tribe's bloodline. Ancient humans once recorded sightings of these majestic creatures as they chased the moon across the night sky, believed to be a pack of beasts following the moon goddess. This bloodline transformation granted Jason immense benefits, as the giant wolf bloodline ascended to silver grade, and his natural abilities surged, elevating him from low-tier bronze to intermediate status. During this period, he diligently sought to cultivate the power of nature, aspiring for it to rival the strength of his bloodline. To his dismay, however, the gap between the two forces only widened, leaving Jason both amused and perplexed, though he found more reasons to laugh. What astonished him further was the awakening of his new talent, the source of bloodline, which positioned him as the progenitor of the Quileute tribe's lineage. This meant that as he ascended in rank, other werewolves would also find greater opportunities for advancement, continually following in his footsteps. Upon his elevation to the silver tier, the vitality of the werewolves' bloodline power significantly surged, resulting in notable enhancements for all. Riel's brother, Seth, even advanced from the mid-bronze tier to the high tier, while 2 newly awakened low-bronze werewolves ascended to the mid-bronze level. Moreover, he discovered his ability to manipulate the source of bloodline talent, unleashing its latent power to grant himself and the werewolves a temporary 30% boost in strength. However, this came at the cost of a subsequent period of fatigue, and excessive use could potentially impair his bloodline potential. Despite these drawbacks, his regard for this talent remained unwavering, especially since it shattered the barriers to advancement within the Quileute tribe. If one day his great wolf bloodline attained the golden or demigod tier, the other werewolves would not lag behind. As for igniting divine fire and reaching the golden divine tier, he had not yet contemplated such lofty aspirations, deeming them exceedingly daunting. Following that fateful night, while Jason's power surged, it was not without repercussions. From that day onward, the Quileute tribe regarded him with peculiar gazes, a sentiment echoed by others, including Riel. This fervent scrutiny resembled that of obsessive fans, as if Jason possessed an innate magnetism that captivated the werewolves. Consequently, he refrained from returning to the ranch for several weeks. During this time, Jason immersed himself in training, particularly focusing on the powers of nature and bloodline, until he fully mastered the source of bloodline talent. Gradually, the werewolves returned to their normal demeanor, allowing him to breathe a sigh of relief. As for his other talent, the lunar eclipse, he initially found it perplexing, but later realized it endowed him with the ability to absorb the power of moonlight. Jason speculated that this might be the origin of the legendary Great Wolf's communion with the moon. The power of moonlight is a form of celestial energy, traditionally wielded only by the royal moon elves among the elven race, yet he discovered that this capability lay hidden within the elfer magic wolf bloodline as well. Thus, he transitioned his nightly training from the basement to the balcony on the top floor, where an inexplicable force drew the luminous moonlight to illuminate his form. The primary function of the lunar eclipse talent resided within his essence. The power of nature encompasses various natural energies. Previously, he had absorbed the most mundane wood element from the environment. The power of moonlight, undeniably a variant of natural energy, differed in its level of potency, belonging to a higher tier. If the wood element is characterized by tranquility, then moonlight is defined by its vastness, mystery, and purity, each possessing its own merits and shortcomings, ultimately dependent on the practitioner's skill. Although the former lacks formidable power, It possesses a harmonious strength that is well suited for novices in their initial stages of cultivation. In contrast, the latter, despite its immense might, proves challenging to master. However, Jason possesses the innate talent of lunar eclipse, granting him an early key to harnessing such power. Were an ordinary extraordinary being to attempt to cultivate this force, they might find themselves consumed by their inner chaos, succumbing to what is colloquially referred to as a demonic deviation. Yet, within Jason, the power of moonlight is being steadily absorbed and refined into natural energy. As if some force within his body were suppressing any potential issues, this natural energy continues to grow stronger while gradually integrating the characteristics of moonlight, transforming Jason's physique from within. What remains is a prolonged period of diligent practice, awaiting the complete metamorphosis of this natural energy. At that point, although Jason's essence will still be at the intermediate bronze level, his raw capabilities will significantly elevate. The difficulty of cultivating moonlight energy undoubtedly differs from that of the wood element, and the pace of cultivation will be considerably slower. Nonetheless, he decisively opts for the former, as the moonlight energy presents him with opportunities to ascend to greater heights in the future. While his progress may be slower, it is steadier. Moreover, his current cultivation speed is already quite rapid compared to other druids. After merely 2 or 3 months of training, he has reached the mid-level of the bronze stage. If the druids of Azeroth were to learn that Jason lamented his slow pace, they would undoubtedly band together to chastise him for his audacity. At this moment, several unwelcome guests arrived at a desolate, abandoned factory, the trio of vampires previously driven away by werewolves. Their humiliating escape left them feeling the sting of disgrace. Particularly, James harbored a deep-seated hatred for the werewolves, gnashing his teeth in fury. Thus, once their injuries had healed, they clamored for revenge, attributing their past defeat to the werewolves' cunning ruse that had caught them off guard. Victoria ultimately acquiesced, as this failure had tarnished her pride. However, before embarking on their vengeance, she needed to recruit new vampires. Otherwise, the 3 of them would stand no chance against the pack of Quileute werewolves. Typically, vampires do not frequently sire new progeny, as the initial embracing requires a substantial expenditure of their own blood energy, which is a reflection of their strength. Selfish vampires rarely squander such resources. Yet, Victoria's awakening of the vampire talent, blood pool, allows her to store additional blood energy, significantly enhancing her regenerative abilities and reducing the cost of initial embracing. The trio of vampires, having reached an accord, set forth towards the nearby town of Quileute, foreshadowing another impending storm of chaos and bloodshed. Chapter 21. The town of Quileute. On the highway, a school bus sped along, with Jason resignedly seated by the window. Today marked the school's autumn excursion, with plans to explore the coastal reserve of Quileute. Under normal circumstances, he would have no desire to attend. However, with his recent transition to cultivating moonlight energy, the time allocated for natural energy practice shifted from day to night, revealing that his daytime hours were now devoid of activities beyond study. Accompanied by the invitation of his teachers and classmates, he decided to attend. However, the unpleasant odor of the bus caused him considerable discomfort, prompting him to request a seat by the window from a classmate, which alleviated his distress somewhat. "How are you feeling now, Jason?" Jessica, seated beside him, inquired with genuine concern. "I feel much better now. I suppose I was just a bit carsick," Jason replied, maintaining a calm facade, as he had only just exchanged seats due to his earlier discomfort. Suddenly, Eric chimed in from behind. "Have you all found your dance partners for the year-end ball?" At this, Jason shook his head. He had been engrossed in his studies and training lately, and it was only now, prompted by Eric's question, that he recalled the teachers had mentioned the event. "Did you not receive an invitation?" "I saw many girls discreetly handing you envelopes," Eric remarked, glancing at Jessica, whose expression appeared somewhat uneasy. Jason could only smile wryly in response. Since his enrollment, he had received no fewer than 100 letters, having once declined an invitation, which resulted in a tearful girl. Consequently, he had accepted every envelope thereafter, though he had never opened one, particularly after refining his lunar energy. The frequency of receiving envelopes increased, as this power seemed to bestow a charm upon him. Even Lyre had commented on his transformation, noting he had become more attractive. Yet when Jason inquired about the specifics, Lyre could not articulate it, only expressing that his demeanor had improved. The collection of envelopes had filled an entire cabinet, and while Lyre initially felt a twinge of jealousy, she had gradually grown indifferent. Nonetheless, her visits had markedly increased, which amused Jason, yet also stirred a pang of sympathy within him. After all, the scale of the Great Deer Ranch was expanding rapidly, dominating much of the market in Fortistown with its premium lamb and beef, and considerations were being made to extend its reach throughout Washington state. Hence, the intricacies of management were numerous, keeping Lyre bustling with activity daily, though she appeared to revel in her responsibilities. The coastline of the Quileute Reserve stretched long, lined with dense forest predominantly composed of verdant pines, which rustled in the autumn breeze, resembling the sound of crashing waves. As the weather turned progressively colder, Jason sensed the chill of winter approaching, yet this did not dampen the students' enthusiasm as they disembarked, engaging in playful antics, while couples strolled in pairs. "What? You invited Edward?" exclaimed a voice, clearly taken aback and unable to modulate its volume. It turned out Bella had invited Edward to join their autumn outing, but he had declined, leaving her somewhat disheartened. "The Cullens generally do not venture near the Quileute Reserve," Jason remarked with a smile as he approached. "Why is that? Is there something amiss here?" Bella, sensing there might be unknown nuances, pressed for clarification. "It is likely to avoid misunderstandings. This is an agreement between the Cullen family and the Quileute tribe," Jason explained, glancing at Bella. "Furthermore, I advise you not to get too close to their family. Trust me, it is not a wise notion." Bella's complexion paled slightly, her expression tinged with discontent. After all, they were classmates, and their shared experiences had fostered some emotional connection. Jason felt compelled to offer a gentle reminder, though whether she would heed it was beyond his concern. At that moment, Jacob approached from a distance, accompanied by two friends, greeting them warmly. Bella, somewhat surprised, exclaimed, "What brings you here? Have you been following me?" "No, Bella," Jason replied, shaking his head. "I informed Jacob that we would be coming this way." Jacob, having grown up in the Quileute Reservation, was the perfect choice to serve as their guide. As they exchanged knowing smiles, Jason and Jacob shared a fist bump, proceeding to introduce themselves to their classmates. Although Jason was the leader of the Quileute werewolves, it was his first visit to the Quileute Reservation, a place where the Quileute people had thrived for generations. As they traversed the coastline, Jason and his group arrived at the Quileute village. Despite being referred to as a village, it had evolved into a small town with a population of nearly 1,000. Alongside traditional ethnic architecture, the streets were lined with a variety of unique eateries and shops, restaurants, and bars, rendering it quite similar to any ordinary town. Strolling down the distinctive streets, the students from Forks were equally captivated, engaging in animated discussions that quickly dispelled Bella's earlier displeasure. However, for those who observed closely, Jason and Jacob suddenly vanished from the crowd. At that moment, Jason followed Jacob to a private residence. Upon entering, they were greeted by Elder Billy, who also served as the mayor of Quileute. In truth, Elder Billy was the mastermind behind this excursion, inspired by a conversation he had with Jason about the commercial development model of tourist towns. This ignited a flicker of hope within him to alleviate the town's poverty. To assist, Jason dedicated an entire day to replicate an operational plan from a town in their homeland, a task that was effortless given his extraordinary mental prowess. This autumn outing represented Quileute's initial foray into engaging with the outside world. Currently, most of the young people from the tribe were employed at the giant deer ranch, while the remaining members had been encouraged to embark on entrepreneurial ventures within the town. Undoubtedly, in an era marked by a lack of entertainment, this commercial model held significant market potential. The group of students from Forks reveled in their experience as novelty, mystery, and distinctiveness became synonymous with their surroundings. However, Elder Billy's purpose for summoning Jason was of greater importance. There had been a noticeable increase in the number of young people awakening to their wolf bloodline, with 5 awakening incidents occurring in the past month. Fortunately, Elder Billy had acted swiftly, relocating them to the ranch to prevent any mishaps. Upon hearing this, Jason instructed Elder Billy to gather the newly awakened werewolves, as well as some of the youth still in their adolescence, to assess their internal conditions using natural forces. The newly awakened werewolves were found to be in excellent health, with their bloodline powers remarkably vigorous. Conversely, some members of the clan, who previously possessed dormant bloodline abilities, inexplicably found them activated. Jacob was among them. His latent bloodline strength was more pronounced than that of ordinary clan members. Hearing Jason's remarks, old Billy grew anxious. What did this signify? Would it pose any dangers to them? There would be no peril. It merely indicated that, no, if I am not mistaken, the likelihood of awakening among all eligible clan members would indeed increase. Chapter 22. The oak tree, the talent known as Bloodline Source, exceeded Jason's expectations. It not only enhanced the potential of the Quileute werewolves, but also elevated the bloodline activity of all Quileute clansmen. Those who had surpassed the age of awakening had lost their chance. Yet those in their adolescence saw their awakening probability shift from a mere possibility to a moderate one. The current surge in awakened werewolves was a result of this explosive phase, and upon understanding the situation, old Billy visibly relaxed. Jason furrowed his brow, stating, "While the increase in awakened werewolves is a positive development, if left unchecked, it could lead to significant issues. Furthermore, there may be even more werewolves awakening in the future." "Indeed. So what shall we do?" Despite their 30-year age difference, old Billy had gradually come to regard Jason as a cornerstone of their endeavors. "Let us organize a training camp this weekend. We should allow those at the Great Elk Ranch to take a breather and notify all werewolves that attendance is mandatory." In truth, Jason had contemplated this idea earlier, but due to the ranch's staffing needs, he had refrained from acting upon it. Now that the Quileute clan members were contributing to the ranch's workforce, resources were more plentiful, prompting Jason to decide against further delay. After discussing the details with old Billy, Jason departed, eager to explore Quileute Town, as it was his first visit. Quileute Town, established more recently than Fortis Town, exhibited some infrastructural shortcomings. However, its buildings and roads appeared notably more pristine. The specially designed Quileute Cultural Street and distinctive shops added a vibrant charm, reminiscent of less favorable experiences from his past life, where numerous tourist spots had left him disenchanted. As he strolled past a fortune-telling shop, he noticed Jessica, Bella, and others eagerly engaging in tarot card readings. Although the witch inside was merely an ordinary person, her ability to create an air of mystique was commendable. "Where did you just run off to?" Bella turned upon spotting Jason, her curiosity piqued, having noted the sudden disappearance of both Jacob and Jason. "I just visited old Billy with Jacob," Jason replied with a smile. Bella's father, Charlie, was a good friend of Billy's, so there was nothing to conceal, and Bella merely nodded in understanding. "Jason, you're back. Let us go make wishes at the wishing tree over there. I've heard that this tree is especially effective," Jessica exclaimed, seizing his hand and leading him eagerly away. Jason cast a helpless glance at the crowd behind him, his innocent expression eliciting chuckles from those around him. However, he did not resist, for to him, it mattered little where he went. As the group rounded the final corner and arrived at the town's central square, they were greeted by a breathtaking sight, a majestic, immobile oak tree towered high at the heart of the square. Astonishingly, its massive trunk occupied 1/3 of the expansive area, comparable to a football field, while its lush foliage cast a protective canopy over the gathering, evoking awe at nature's artistry. Though the notion of a wishing tree originated from Jason, this particular oak was not his idea. It was said that the Quileute tribe had migrated here because of this very tree, which, in those times, was regarded as a miraculous phenomenon. If the Quileute werewolves served as guardians of the Quileute tribe, then this oak stood as their divine protector, a vital spiritual emblem for the community. At that moment, Jason gradually emerged from his initial shock, unlike the others, whose astonishment was unadulterated. He maintained an outward calmness while turmoil roiled within him. To the Druids, oaks symbolize the sacred, and among them exists a branch known as the Tree Shepherds, whose existence revolves around these mighty oaks. The Tree Shepherds possess the ability to awaken the spirit of nature residing within the oak. Once awakened, the oak undergoes profound transformations, potentially evolving into a treant of nature or a war treant. Even in the land of Azeroth, treants are regarded as formidable beings. However, not all oaks can awaken the spirit of nature. Only those that are at least a millennium old have the potential. Jason sensed that this particular oak of the Quileute tribe was of a millennial caliber. No wonder he felt such unease. Should he manage to awaken the spirit of this oak, he would at least be dealing with a treant of golden tier. What could possibly account for such a colossal oak? The crowd marveled. Upon reaching the base of the oak, they discovered numerous students at the adjacent wishing pavilion, clutching wish tokens to make their dreams known. Some couples had even purchased love locks, pledging their devotion to one another for eternity. This unprecedented commercial model for a scenic area was immensely popular among the youth, continually challenging their previously impoverished worldviews. From Jason's perspective, apart from himself, the other students eagerly rushed to the wishing pavilion, where staff began to explain the process of participation. He stepped past the throng and approached the colossal oak. Standing at its roots felt akin to standing at the feet of a towering giant. He sensed that even the slightest movement from it could trigger seismic shifts. As he placed his hands upon the oak's sturdy trunk, he began to channel the natural energy within himself. Having attained the mid-bronze tier over a month ago, Jason's unwavering dedication to training had solidified his foundation, allowing the natural energy within him to take on the form of a small tree, radiating a faint silvery luminescence that cloaked the vibrant life around him in an air of mystery. To his astonishment, as the power of nature coursed through the oak, the magnificent tree seemed to awaken, unleashing a mysterious force that continuously washed over Jason's body. His consciousness was engulfed in a haze, as if the world had succumbed to an impenetrable darkness. He felt akin to a seed yearning for sunlight, relentlessly challenging the external world. Ultimately, it broke free from the confines of the soil, taking root and sprouting, thriving amidst the tempest, and eventually growing into a towering tree. At that moment, Jason felt as though he had become a vessel for the oak, receiving the timeless gifts of nature. Though it felt like an eternity had passed, it was merely a fleeting moment. Upon regaining consciousness, he discovered that his natural powers had progressed, nearing a breakthrough into the higher realms of bronze. More significantly, his spirit had undergone a purification through nature's baptism, embodying the Taoist principle of unity between heaven and humanity. In this age of information overload, the purity of the human spirit had long since dissipated. While he appeared untroubled in the present, he might find himself stagnating at the silver rank in the future. Even in the realm of Azeroth, those who achieved the golden tier were exceedingly rare, as ascending to such heights demanded a profound harmony between body and spirit. However, Jason remained oblivious to the immense boon he had received, as this was his first undertaking in cultivation. He merely felt an enhanced clarity in his perception of nature. "Jason, what are you doing?" "We need to head back," Jessica called from a distance. While everyone remained spirited, their autumn excursion was drawing to a close. Chapter 23. Lillian. That night, Jason stealthily returned to the town of Quileute, and the sight of the towering ancient tree once more filled him with awe. As a druid, he could learn the tree shepherd's summoning arts, but with his current prowess, awakening the spirit of this millennia-old oak was beyond his reach. Ordinarily, he would need to attain at least the pinnacle of the silver rank, or the golden rank, to have a chance of rousing a spirit of that caliber. However, Jason's return to the ancient oak under the cover of night indicated that alternative means were at his disposal. In the deserted square, as the natural energy surged within him, a fierce wind arose, causing his garments to flutter, and a magical circle materialized upon the ground. It was a summoning spell. This was precisely why he chose to come at night. After all, the Quileute tribe was primarily composed of ordinary folk, and it was best that the secrets of the extraordinary realm remained concealed from most. At that moment, a green orb of light emerged from the summoning circle. Upon closer inspection, it became evident that this was not merely a glowing sphere, but rather a diminutive being. A tiny sprite, no larger than a thumb, with an exquisite visage and a shapely form, adorned with translucent wings reminiscent of a dragonfly. As it fluttered around Jason, its laughter resonated like the tinkling of wind chimes. This was a spirit of nature, inadvertently summoned during Jason's practice of summoning arts, born from the world tree of the elven realm. The world tree, revered as the sacred tree of the elven race, births a new generation of nature spirits each year. Among them is Lillian, a young spirit who, having yet to find her destined ancient tree, remains in her ancestral homeland. Jason extended his palm, and Lillian swiftly alighted upon it, affectionately embracing his fingers. Filled with joy, she thought, "The forest has called me again. I adore the scent of the forest." Jason gazed at the nature spirit before him, who was the only summoned creature to voluntarily request a summoning contract with him. He had diligently practiced the art of summoning. Though most of his conjured beings were merely ordinary magical beasts, the least impressive was a goblin, easily vanquished by an average person with minimal training. Yet, surprises were not absent, and Lillian was one of those delightful anomalies. Born with an innate affinity for nature, she was adored by both humans and magical beasts alike. Truly a favored child of the natural world. "Lillian, do you see what I have found?" Jason gently stroked her head with his finger, gesturing towards the ancient oak tree behind him. The nature spirit's enchanting eyes widened in awe as she beheld the magnificent tree, her gaze transforming from blankness to sheer delight. With a spirited flutter of her tiny wings, she joyfully circled the great oak. Tree, what a grand oak," she chimed, her voice light and airy. Suddenly, as if recalling something, she swiftly returned to Jason's side. "Did the forest find this for me?" Seeing the eager anticipation in Lillian's eyes brought a smile to Jason's face, and he nodded gently. "Yes. Hooray. Lillian has a tree. Lillian has her tree now," she exclaimed, leaping in joy and dancing through the air. Yet, Jason felt compelled to interrupt her jubilant celebration. While he too wished for Lillian to become the spirit of the ancient oak, he knew certain matters required clarity for her sake. Becoming the spirit of the oak would bind Lillian to the primary realm, preventing her from returning to her own plane through summoning. Thus, he was uncertain whether she would agree to such a fate. After explaining the situation, Lillian fell silent, her little head hanging in contemplation. Just when Jason thought she might relinquish her hopes, she looked up at him with her charming eyes and asked, "Can Lillian have her tree and still have many friends here?" "Absolutely," Jason replied, taken aback by the realization that Lillian's concern had been about friendship. He quickly reassured her. As he continued to stroke her head gently, her melodious laughter filled the air. With a graceful flutter of her wings, the verdant glow enveloping her brightened, and she slowly ascended towards the towering oak, ultimately merging with its trunk. Suddenly, the ancient oak appeared to be awakened, radiating a vibrant green light. As the entire trunk and branches trembled ever so slightly, producing a soothing rustling sound, the radiance swiftly dissipated, and at that moment, the towering tree seemed to come alive, its trunk and branches continuously growing, causing the very ground to tremble. Roots emerged and writhed, unsettling the earth as if a minor earthquake had occurred. Ultimately, the oak expanded from 1/3 to nearly half the size of the square, while beneath the surface, its ancient roots had spread throughout the entire town. Once the oak ceased its growth, Jason learned from the summoning contract that Lillian, the bronze tier nature spirit, had ascended to become a silver tier entity. And the oak had transformed into a silver tier ancient tree. Their relationship was symbiotic, however, due to the immense power contained within the millennial-old tree. Lillian needed to enter a state of dormancy to assimilate it. Upon grasping the situation, Jason's previously furrowed brow relaxed. For him, everything else was secondary. As long as Lillian remained unharmed. Despite their brief acquaintance, he had grown fond of the charming little sprite. What transpired? Hearing a noise, Jason turned to find Jacob and a group of werewolves, who had been startled awake. Fortunately, the ordinary townsfolk had been intercepted by them at the outset. Otherwise, he would have struggled to provide an explanation. Setting aside his awkwardness regarding how to clarify the situation, we shift to the rear mountains of Quileute town, where the sudden tremors caused numerous rocks to plummet, and a massive boulder crashed down, creating a thunderous sound as it shattered the ground, leaving a gaping, bottomless pit. As the vibration ceased, the valley quickly returned to tranquility. Chapter 24. The cave-dwelling spider. A sudden, sharp gunshot rang out in the forest, sending birds and animals scattering in fright. Amidst the thicket, a wary stag scanned its surroundings, only to be struck down by an immense force, collapsing into the underbrush. Hall. I hit it. I hit it. From a distance, two figures emerged from the grass. A young boy brandished an old-fashioned hunting rifle, exulting as he sprinted toward his quarry. Beside him, the middle-aged man, Hall, chuckled and followed suit. However, upon reaching the spot where the stag had fallen, they found only a pool of blood. With no sign of the creature, they exchanged bewildered glances, yet Hall, being the more seasoned of the two, noticed the crushed foliage and began to track the trail. Little Beano, it may not have fallen yet. We must pursue it. Eventually, they spotted the wounded stag beneath a tree, barely clinging to life amid the grass. Hall smiled triumphantly at Little Beano, preparing to approach his prize. In that moment, Hall inadvertently glanced upward, and there, perched upon the tree, was a colossal black spider. Its cephalothorax bulging, adorned with a pattern resembling an old man's visage, its 8 eyes coldly fixated on the two men. A cold sweat trickled down the middle-aged man's brow as he grasped the young man's arm, signaling the imminent danger above. The young man, upon seeing the gigantic human-faced spider, was instantly paralyzed with fear. Oh my God, is this real? In the next moment, the grotesque-faced spider descended with remarkable agility despite its colossal size, blocking the path of the cicada and casting a cold gaze upon the two individuals, evidently the orchestrator behind the deer's arrival. This display visibly startled young Bruno, who hastily raised his antiquated shotgun and fired in a panic, the bullet fortuitously striking the spider and causing a spray of green blood. Although this act inflicted harm upon the creature, it simultaneously incited its wrath, unleashing a chilling, eerie shriek that sent both men into a frantic escape through the wilderness. Sprinting desperately, after a considerable distance, their energy spent, they leaned against the trees, panting and cautiously scanning their surroundings, relieved to find that the terrifying beast had not pursued them. However, Paul seemed to sense something amiss and looked up, only to discover a gigantic spider looming directly above them. In a moment of desperation, the middle-aged man shoved Bruno aside, but in the next instant, the face spider pounced upon him. Fortunately, his shotgun absorbed the impact of the spider's fangs, and Bruno, regaining his wits, scrambled to his feet to assist, though his weapon was devoid of ammunition. Nevertheless, he swung the iron stock with all his might, delivering a powerful blow to the spider's head, momentarily stunning it. Seizing the opportunity, Paul shoved the creature away and raised his shotgun, blasting a gaping hole in its cranium. Once they confirmed the face spider's demise, the two collapsed weakly onto the grass. Young Bruno, recovering more swiftly, curiously rose to examine the monster's carcass, eager to ascertain what manner of creature it was. However, it soon dawned on him that something was amiss, prompting him to call Hall over and to thoroughly inspect the body again. Bruno, anxiety creeping into his voice, exclaimed, "Something's not right. I clearly hit it, yet there are only wounds on its head. We must flee. Bruno, we need to leave immediately," Hall urged, and both men instinctively recognized the gravity of their situation. Just as they prepared to escape, it was already too late. Numerous shadowy figures emerged around them, countless compound eyes fixated upon their forms. Dozens of gigantic burrowing face spiders surrounded them, their predatory gazes instilling an overwhelming sense of despair. Some of the face spiders could no longer restrain themselves, their sharp pincers poised to strike, and with explosive force, they lunged at the two. However, a swifter shadow materialized, instantly toppling the attacking face spider to the ground, the powerful blow rendering its head a mere pulp, mingling with an unidentifiable fluid. A massive black wolf appeared, guarding Hall and his son, its fierce gaze locked onto the face spiders. Yet, the death of their companion only galvanized the face spiders, who began to assault the giant wolf. The creature seemed to anticipate this onslaught, emitting a howl before engaging the spiders in a fierce battle. This formidable black wolf was none other than Jason transformed. Although the face spiders were numerous, in true combat, they found themselves at a disadvantage. Beneath the shadowy claws of the demonic wolf, the low-ranking, bronze-tier humanoid spiders faced inevitable death, suffering wounds that seemed insurmountable. Despite their formidable pincers and legs as sharp as spears, they were utterly incapable of inflicting significant harm upon the alpha demonic wolf, a creature of silver-tier prowess possessing remarkable defensive capabilities. Moreover, during its training, the wolf had comprehended a rudimentary application of lunar energy, enabling it to envelop its body in a protective layer. Had it not been for the need to shield the two ordinary individuals behind him, Jason would have long since opted for a more aggressive approach. For now, he could only endure the frustration of repelling these bothersome foes while awaiting an opportune moment. However, Jason's wait was not prolonged, as the earlier howl had summoned the presence of the colossal wolves, who began to emerge from the thicket. The Quileute werewolves had finally arrived, launching an assault upon the battlefield. Although the number of these giant wolves was less than half that of the humanoid spiders, their individual strength surpassed that of their adversaries. Coupled with their innate ability for telepathic coordination, the disorganized formation of the humanoid spiders was easily cleaved apart by the wolves, akin to a dagger slicing through silk. Seizing the opportunity, Jason initiated his own attack. The dozens of massive humanoid spiders were rendered utterly defenseless against the onslaught of the wolf pack, and Jason's involvement hastened the spiders' collapse. Virtually no spider stood a chance against him, as he unleashed his full potential. The number of spiders he felt nearly rivaled that of the wolves' collective hunt. After suffering significant losses, the remaining spiders recognized the insurmountable disparity in strength and began to disperse, with only a fortunate few escaping the clutches of the wolves. Chapter 25. The Spider's Lair. The forest floor was littered with the carcasses of humanoid spiders, eliciting a mix of relief and concern from Hall and his son, who feared that having escaped the jaws of one predator, they might now fall prey to another. Today had been a tumultuous roller coaster for them. Jason, observing the defeated spiders, had no intention of pursuing them further, as the remaining few posed no threat to the wolves and could merely serve as practice prey. The enormous black wolf approached Hall and his son with graceful steps. Although it was the giant wolf that had just saved them, the two men could not help but feel a sense of trepidation in its imposing presence. After all, they had just witnessed how the terrifying humanoid spiders had been dispatched with ease, rendering them insignificant in comparison. The legends of the Quileute werewolves had long circulated among the tribe, yet only a select few were aware of the existence of these colossal beasts. Most regarded them merely as myth. Jason found himself in a quandary, uncertain of how to address the two men. The secret of the Quileute wolves was not yet ready to be unveiled, yet they had witnessed the entire encounter. "Little Borno, what troubles you?" Jason inquired. As Borno suddenly convulsed unnaturally, his face flushed as though aflame, emitting sounds of distress. Faced with this sudden turn of events, Hall, as a father, was filled with anxiety, yet found himself powerless in the wilderness, regretting once more his decision to venture out for hunting that morning. Upon witnessing the giant wolf, Hall instinctively moved to obstruct its path. Yet, gazing into the wolf's eyes, which brimmed with wisdom and benevolence, he found himself pleading for the creature to save his son in a moment of desperation. Suddenly, a human voice pierced the air, prompting Hall to lift his head abruptly. The majestic wolf had vanished, replaced by a strikingly handsome young man. This youth, unlike the flamboyant Korean beauties, possessed a chiseled visage and a resolute gaze that deterred direct eye contact. His tousled brown hair exuded a wild charm, and his bare torso revealed a well-proportioned and muscular physique. Had such a form existed in his past life, it would have undoubtedly drawn the attention of 90% of the women in the gym, while the remaining 10% would likely be indifferent to men. Alas, only 2 males were present, leaving Jason in mild regret. Placing his hand upon young Burno's chest, a surge of natural energy flowed into his body, assessing his condition. Soon, Jason's expression morphed into one of peculiar intrigue as he observed the father and son. Noticing Hall's anxious demeanor, Jason decided to disclose the truth. They had materialized in the vicinity of the Quileute tribe, and young Burno's awakening was a result of the recent traumatic event. This revelation explained Jason's odd expression. Since Burno's bloodline had begun to awaken, he felt no need to conceal the existence of the Quileute werewolves. After elucidating the situation to Hall, the initial shock on his face swiftly gave way to a calm acceptance. While he had always considered the legends to be mere folklore, the sudden reality of them unfolding before him was jarring yet somehow more palatable due to their familiarity. Jason felt a twinge of regret as he had initially intended for them to receive training at the Great Deer Ranch. But now it seemed 2 potential laborers had been lost, much to Riel's frequent lament about the ranch's labor shortage. Had Hall and his son been privy to Jason's current thoughts, they might have wished to delve into his heart to discern its true nature. After ensuring both father and son were settled at the ranch, Jason recognized that Bruno's awakening would require time and that the ranch would provide the necessary environment. The success of his bloodline awakening depended solely on Bruno's willpower. It was a transformative journey akin to a caterpillar emerging as a butterfly. Success would mean survival. Failure would lead to demise, a fate beyond Jason's current abilities to alter. Leaving Hall in the company of an awakened tribesman, Jason returned to the ranch's conference room where Riel and 2 elders awaited him. Recently, monstrous spiders have emerged around Crut Town and the nearby ranch, Riel announced. A glimmer of relief breaking through his previously anxious demeanor. We have traced the source. Without waiting for Jason's inquiry, he continued. Sam and his team tracked the fleeing spiders to the mountains behind Crut Town. The sudden appearance of these creatures had left the Crut werewolves in disarray. With the first assaults targeting the ranch adjacent to Crut Town, where the vibrant livestock represented a lavish feast for the ravenous spiders. Fortunately, the herdsmen were quick to detect the presence of the man-faced spiders and promptly alerted the werewolves, thereby averting greater losses for the ranch. However, a dozen cattle and sheep were still slaughtered, causing considerable distress to the frugal Riel. Upon learning the location of the spiders, he insisted on joining despite Jason's objections. After the discovery of the colossal man-faced spiders, Jason personally led the charge to eliminate the spiders surrounding the ranch and the town, which explained his sudden appearance to rescue Hall and his son. Individually, the man-faced spiders were not particularly formidable. However, their sheer numbers, coupled with their sharp pincers and venomous limbs, posed a significant threat to ordinary werewolves, though Jason remained unscathed. Fortunately, the werewolves possessed remarkable regenerative abilities, allowing them to recover swiftly as long as they did not absorb a substantial amount of venom at once. Jason and Riel, leading their fellow werewolves, finally arrived at the rear mountain. Along the way, they eradicated several small clusters of man-faced spiders, eliminating nearly all solitary ones in the vicinity. Thanks to the giant wolves' acute sense of smell and incredible speed, the man-faced spiders stood little chance against their hunters, who rendered the spiders' natural ambush tactics ineffective. However, they could advance no further into the valley. The group gazed skeptically at what was once a lush expanse now shrouded in a ghostly web, resembling a monstrous lair. Jason questioned whether he had stumbled into the lair of the silk-woven cave. Observing his kin, he noted that the prolonged state of battle had begun to tire even the most formidable werewolves. Additionally, many bore injuries that had yet to heal due to the torment of spider venom, prompting him to exercise caution. Chapter 26. The Cave of the Demon Eye. The sunlight was obscured by a canopy of webs, transforming the once verdant trees and rocky cliffs into a spectral landscape cloaked in white silk, with countless palm-sized spiders lurking within. Jason felt as though he had entered another realm. He instructed the Quileute werewolves to return and prepare for a more thorough strategy, while he decided to venture inside alone to gather intelligence. Given the complex terrain that limited the giant wolf's speed, he opted to infiltrate in his original form. His shadow step, executed in his natural state, retained approximately 80% of the giant wolf's capabilities, particularly in the dim surroundings where it allowed him to conceal both his form and presence, his main advantage for this mission. Stealthily avoiding the webs along the path, he circumvented the colossal man-faced spiders he encountered from a distance. Though these creatures had poor eyesight due to their prolonged existence in darkness, they had developed heightened sensory abilities. He narrowly avoided detection when he drew too near. As he delved deeper, he discovered hundreds of colossal man-faced spiders, further heightening his wariness. Who could fathom how this valley concealed so many man-faced spiders? Jason felt a surge of relief that he had not recklessly led the Quileute werewolves into this perilous situation. Had he done so, despite his own formidable strength, the onslaught of numerous colossal man-faced spiders would have undoubtedly resulted in devastating casualties among his kin. The valley, shrouded in a web-like embrace, was not particularly vast. Despite Jason's considerable detours that consumed a fair amount of time, he eventually reached the heart of the valley. Standing atop its edge, he gazed down into a massive, bowl-shaped pit, at the bottom of which lay an enormous oval cavern. From a distance, it resembled the malevolent eye of an abyss, emanating an eerie aura. While numerous face spiders scuttled in and out of the cavern's entrance, these face spiders originated from underground, explaining why he had never encountered them before. Yet this revelation sparked an even greater curiosity within him. How extensive could the subterranean world be to sustain such a multitude of spider beasts? With his curiosity piqued, Jason activated his shadow step, taking the risk of being detected as he stealthily navigated the openings created by the comings and goings of the face spiders. inching cautiously to the cavern's side. The pitch-black void below appeared to descend into an unfathomable abyss, occasionally producing a haunting whistle caused by strange air currents, further confirming to Jason that the mysteries beneath were far from simple. Though he yearned to investigate further, he understood that the moment was not yet ripe for such an undertaking. Just as he prepared to retreat, an unexpected occurrence transpired. A cohort of 5 colossal face spiders emerged from the cavern, and the lead spider seemed to sense something amiss, cautiously probing in Jason's direction. Observing the encroaching face spider and the barren surroundings that offered no refuge, Jason realized that his exposure was inevitable. It was precisely at this moment that he lamented his unfortunate luck for the day. Resolved not to hide any longer, he activated Shadow Step, manifesting behind the cluster of spiders. With his right hand, he concentrated the power of shadows into a claw, which swiftly pierced through the head of one face spider. Without pausing, he leaped onto the back of another spider. This time, the creature sensed the imminent danger but was too slow to react, resulting in its head being cleaved in half. However, the remaining 3 face spiders had now recognized the threat, unleashing a shrill, piercing shriek as they coordinated an assault on Jason from 3 different angles. In response, Jason merely smiled faintly, unleashing a vibrant green vine that ensnared the leftmost face spider. Summoning all his strength, he wielded the vine as a makeshift flail, crashing it into the other 2 face spiders, sending them sprawling. Seizing the moment of chaos, Jason's shadowy claws effortlessly sliced through the heads of 2 face spiders, while another was impaled to the ground by a spear formed from his magical vines. The outcome of true battles often hinges on a fleeting instant. The drawn-out fight scenes depicted in films are mere fabrications of storytelling. This marked the first time Jason fought without assuming his dire wolf form. Despite the brevity of the encounter, he had exerted his full strength, signifying his continuous growth and power. The adrenaline surged through him, igniting a thrilling excitement. Yet he was acutely aware that this was not a place for prolonged presence, as the recent skirmish had drawn the attention of other face spiders. A multitude of them hastening towards his location, Jason hurriedly exited the Cave of the Eye. Yet the labyrinthine maze woven with layers of spider silk in the valley severely impeded his pace as he glanced back at the swiftly approaching humanoid spiders. Resolutely, Jason summoned the shadow claws to tear through the webbing, intending to force his way out. The chase unfolded, with Jason and the swarm of spiders entangled in a relentless pursuit that drew them ever closer. Suddenly, an ominous sense of danger surged above him, sending frantic warnings through his mind. Without hesitation, Jason evaded to the side, as magical vines transformed into a makeshift shield upon his back. A shadowy figure lunged towards him with alarming speed. Fortunately, the vine shield bought him a precious moment, allowing him to narrowly escape the razor-sharp blade that grazed the surface of his back. The assailant was a colossal humanoid spider, slightly larger than the others, possessing 8 insectoid legs and an additional pair of glistening, sharp blades that emanated a chilling light. He had no doubt that these blades could sever his body, and for the first time, he teetered on the precipice of life and death, drenched in cold sweat, igniting an inferno of rage within him. Quickly retaliating, he harnessed the raw power of nature into 2 magical vines that burrowed into the ground, launching a surprise attack from beneath the scythe-like spider. The vines ensnared the unsuspecting creature, and as it thrashed desperately, Jason activated his shadow step, reappearing behind the scythe spider, channeling the forces of nature into shadowy power. He formed claws and struck a decisive blow to its head, followed by a powerful punch to its neck, swiftly ending the life of this mid-tier bronze scythe spider. Emerging from the webbed lair in a state of disarray, Jason joined a gathering of companions to discuss their brief but perilous journey. Yet, the unsettling glances from others left him feeling uneasy. To Jason, the most significant revelation was the uncertain existence of an underground world, a mystery that has long eluded understanding. While many scientists assert the reality of such a realm, no definitive proof has surfaced. In his previous life, Jason had engaged in lengthy discussions with friends regarding this very topic. Ancient Indian texts recount that, in primordial times, a tunnel named Agartha existed beneath the Earth's surface, traversing the depths of the Atlantic and connecting Asia, Africa, North America, and Europe, effectively linking the entire globe. It is said that this legendary underground tunnel conceals countless treasures, prompting many to embark on expeditions under the guise of archaeology. Ultimately, traces of this subterranean passage were first discovered in the tropical rainforests of Africa, although much of it had collapsed, leaving only remnants behind. Subsequently, a similar collapsed tunnel was found in Peru. From the accumulation of evidence, it appears highly probable that a subterranean world indeed exists. If these spider monstrosities once inhabited a vast underground realm abundant in resources, many enigmas would find their explanations. However, The pressing concern now lies in how to eradicate this horde of humanoid spiders, and from his recent experience, it seems that the spider can possess even more formidable beasts. Chapter 27. The Flame Eater. A burst of fire erupted into the sky within the valley. Despite the biting cold of the northern winds in November, they could not hinder the raging inferno. Rather, the winds fanned the flames, accelerating the spread of the already combustible spider webs. In an instant, the lair of the spiders seemed to awaken, and as the flames swiftly encircled them, the spiders began to flee in a frenzy. Unfortunately, they could not escape the rapid advance of the fire. The colossal man-faced spider managed to resist for a short while, but the smaller spiders succumbed to the flames, rolling in agony before swiftly ceasing their struggles. Jason Leal and his kinsfolk, standing in the wind's favor, could only lament in the face of such a conflagration. All obstacles appeared futile. A direct assault on the spider's lair was certainly inadvisable, not to mention the daunting odds of nearly 1 to 10. Even a victory would likely come at a devastating cost. Ultimately, Jason resolved to employ fire as their weapon. Most of his kin opposed this decision, though the saying about burning down the mountain while sitting in prison was not uttered here. The Quileute sanctuary was their ancestral home, and thus, some trepidation lingered, fearing a widespread forest fire. However, Jason, having once served as a forest ranger, possessed knowledge of fire prevention techniques and had participated in frontline fire protection efforts. Hence, a carefully managed fire break, long and wide, emerged before the flames, obstructing their further spread. Yet, even so, sparks erupted from the flames, cascading towards the distant woods, threatening to ignite another blaze. Just as the Quileute residents grew increasingly anxious, a charming little creature appeared amidst the flames, emitting a melodious call, as if the sparks drifting away were being drawn back home by it. Upon closer observation, one could discern that the wild flames seemed to be restrained by an invisible force. Whenever they attempted to breach the fire break, they were thwarted. Indeed, as the saying goes, one thing can conquer another. This delightful creature, known as the Flame Eater, resembled a small monkey, its crimson fur flickering like flames as it danced and rolled joyfully within the fire. This was also the final contract for Jason, a high-tier bronze magical beast endowed with rare dual talents of fire control and a fiery physique. It was the presence of the Flame Eater that emboldened Jason to pursue this plan despite the opposition from others. To secure its allegiance, he offered the long-preserved six-winged ironback centipede essence as payment. The fierce blaze, originally expected to burn for half a day, began to subside after 2 hours. As a gentle rain enveloped the entire Quileute sanctuary, Jason let out a sigh of relief. While he had great confidence in the plan's success, one could never predict which would come first, tomorrow or an unexpected event. Thus, with a meticulous mind, he and his kin continued to patrol the valley, vigilant against potential fires in other areas. Upon completing its task, the Flame Eater leaped into Jason's arms like a child seeking praise. Although a fire-type magical beast, the Flame Eater possessed a notably gentle disposition. The crowd gazed in astonishment at the small beast cradled in his arms, while Lyre's eyes sparkled with delight as she fixated on the fire swallower, reminiscent of a child encountering a cherished toy. Jason understood her sentiments. Despite her usual demeanor of a strong woman, her heart was tender. After whispering something to the fire swallower, she gently placed it into Lyre's embrace. The creature seemed to comprehend her intentions, settling obediently in Lyre's arms, bringing a radiant smile to her face. The valley, once cloaked in a web of spiders, had now been reduced to ashes by the raging fire, with remnants of spider carcasses strewn about, serving as the final testament to the devastation. Though harsh, Jason felt no regret. The conflict among races was inherently brutal. The Quileute sanctuary was limited in size, making the coexistence of the Quileute tribe and the humanoid spider swarm impossible. Survival necessitated the elimination of the weak. Together, they cleared a path leading to the central cave of the valley. Returning to this place, in stark contrast to his initial disarray, Jason now stood with unassailable confidence. Peering once more into the cave, the absence of webs unveiled that the depths were not the fathomless abyss he had imagined. Thanks to the werewolf's exceptional vision, he discerned the cave's floor, estimating it to be approximately 200 meters below. The contemplation of whether to descend or not seemed somewhat superfluous. In his past life, Jason had always relished adventure and challenge. After all, who in their right mind would choose to be an international forest ranger over a more mundane urban occupation? Moreover, without a clear understanding of what lay beneath the cave, one could not predict when a horde of gigantic humanoid spiders might emerge. This descent was merely for reconnaissance. Having too many people would be counterproductive, so he resolved to go alone. However, his declaration was met with vehement opposition from Seth, Sam, and the others, with Lyre's gaze even reflecting a hint of menace. They were adamant that Jason, as the leader of the Quileute werewolves, should not venture down alone, compelling him to concede. Nevertheless, since the primary goal was exploration and avoiding confrontation, it was unnecessary for everyone to descend together. Ultimately, he decided to bring Lyre, Sam, Seth, and Jerry, who had recently ascended to the upper tier of bronze rank. Their participation in numerous battles had afforded the werewolves ample growth, both in combat experience and bloodline power. Observing closely, Jason noted that several tribe members were nearing the threshold of a breakthrough, and it might not be long before they surpassed their current limits. Under the influence of Jason's innate bloodline source, Lyre, Sam, and Seth were gradually beginning their transformation into Quileute's magical wolves. Once this metamorphosis was complete, they would gain mastery over the shadow powers and innate skills of the Quileute magical wolves, significantly enhancing their strength. The dark cave loomed like the gaping maw of an abyss, slowly swallowing the figures of Jason and his companions as the climbing rope extended behind them, leading them into another realm. Chapter 28. The Underworld. At this moment in the town of Forks, Bella was seated in her boyfriend Edward's car, en route to a gathering of the Cullen family. The experiences of the past few months had been nothing short of magical for Bella, should she ever pen a book. It would undoubtedly be titled How to Become a Vampire's Girlfriend or The Overbearing Vampire Fell in Love with Me. Edward had informed her that this event was the Cullen family's signature activity, playing baseball during a thunderstorm, a spectacle featuring a group of non-human vampires engaging in the sport. Had anyone considered the feelings of the baseball? While Bella was lost in thought, they arrived at their destination, where the entire Cullen family had gathered. As the storm rolled in, accompanied by the rumble of thunder, the curtain was drawn on this year's baseball match. The sound of resounding strikes echoed as Edward unleashed the full extent of his speed, dashing across the field with remarkable swiftness. Observing the otherworldly beings on the field, Bella felt a mix of astonishment and envy, her thoughts turning to the idea of becoming a vampire for the first time. It must be said that the vampires of Twilight were afforded a life of luxury, an extended existence, superhuman abilities, and an innate allure, akin to a protagonist of their own tale. Repeated home runs sent the atmosphere among the vampires into a frenzy. Yet, at that moment, Alice, poised to swing, suddenly seemed to sense something amiss. Her gift of foresight had activated. Alert! A vampire is approaching, Alice declared, her voice tinged with anxiety. Instantly, the Cullen family grew tense, particularly Edward, who cast a worried glance at Bella. Although encountering a vampire was not inherently dangerous, especially since they were not from opposing factions, Bella, being human, was perilously exposed amidst unfamiliar vampires, like a sheep in a lion's den. A conflict could prove exceedingly hazardous for her. As Edward pondered how to conceal Bella, three figures swiftly emerged from the surrounding woods. It was the trio from the Volturi. Ever since Victoria had resolved to retaliate against the Quileute tribe, she had gone into hiding, fervently creating new vampires. Their arrival in Forks was aimed at rallying the Cullens to confront the Quileute werewolves. Even if the Cullens declined, it would provide an opportunity to reclaim Jasper. Hey, you brought snacks to the game. Why not share? James's ill-timed remark shattered any pretense of camaraderie. The Cullen family's already heightened sensitivity erupted into tension. Had Carlyle not restrained Edward, he would have rushed out to confront the loquacious vampire. Thus, both parties parted ways in discord. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Jason and his group of 5 had finally reached their subterranean destination after a grueling climb. Despite the obstacles they faced, Jason's ability to manipulate vines had allowed them to navigate several crises unscathed, rendering their journey more perilous in perception than reality. What then lay in wait 200 meters beneath the surface? The profound darkness and oppressive atmosphere evoked an instinctive aversion within their bodies, rendering even the night vision bestowed by the bloodline of the great wolf insufficient to discern their surroundings. However, Jason had anticipated such circumstances and had prepared lighting equipment in advance. When the powerful flashlight illuminated the cavern, a sudden burst of dazzling colors momentarily blinded Jason and his companions. As their sight gradually returned, they were astonished by the breathtaking environment that enveloped them. The entire subterranean cavern was adorned with natural, multifaceted crystals. The light reflected off these gems, illuminating the underground world in a mesmerizing display. It was extraordinarily beautiful. Lyle gazed in astonishment at the scene before him. After a brief moment of awe, and following a simple regrouping, Jason took the lead. Fully aware that time was of the essence in the depths below. Should their supplies dwindle, they would face the peril of being forced to retreat or becoming trapped within this subterranean realm. The pathways resembled rugged mountain trails. Yet Jason and his group were far from ordinary, and thus found the trek manageable. Curiously, however, after nearly half a day spent underground, they had yet to uncover any trace of the presumed lair of the human-faced spiders. Instead, the terrain began to smooth and widen, provoking a sense of anticipation in Jason. Have you discovered something? Lyle inquired, noticing Jason's peculiar expression. Is the path above or below us more even? Jason countered. Certainly below. Are you suggesting we have been descending all this time? I had assumed we were ascending, while suddenly realized, enlightenment dawning upon him. Precisely. Moreover, the terrain continues to broaden. We must be nearing our destination, Jason remarked as he pressed onward. Half an hour later, they abruptly halted, staring in a daze at the spectacle before them. They found themselves in an expansive subterranean valley, approximately the size of a small town. A colossal ruin loomed before them, with collapsed structures and fractured earthen walls lying undisturbed in the depths for millennia. What rendered the scene even more surreal was the sight of a distant underground lake encircling the entire valley, evoking the sensation of being on an island. Could it be that we have truly arrived at the fabled underground tunnels? Lyle exclaimed in wonder. Yet, Jason had never visited the Agartha ruins, leaving him uncertain. I too am unsure, but it is difficult to fathom that humans once traversed this place. What calamity befell these subterranean dwellers, causing them to vanish into the annals of time? Let us proceed inside and explore. Everyone be cautious, for the lair of the human-faced spiders may be here, Jason urged. The group marveled as they stepped into the ancient ruins, where the structures had succumbed to decay over the ages. There is nothing here at all. Where on earth have those wretched spiders gone? Seth fumed, venting his frustration by kicking the earthen wall. With a resounding crash, the wall crumbled, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Come quickly, see what I have discovered, Seth exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement as the earthen wall crumbled. Jason hurried over, only to find a collection of eggs, astonishingly large, each resembling a washing machine in size. The wall that Seth had toppled had struck one of the colossal eggs, creating fissures on its surface. Curiously, Seth reached out to touch the viscous substance seeping from the cracks and, perplexed, remarked, could the human-faced spider be born from an egg? Just as he turned to seek opinions from the others, he was taken aback to find Jason and the others gazing gravely behind him. Upon turning, Seth was met with the sight of a gigantic creature's head looming above him, a massive lizard-like beast. Its gaping maw seemed capable of swallowing him whole. Upon spotting the intruders attempting to steal its eggs, the subterranean dragon lizard unfurled the membranous frill around its neck and let out a furious roar, which Jason could sense signaled its displeasure. Chapter 29, Subterranean Dragon Lizard. Just as Seth felt certain of his impending doom, a tremendous force yanked him backward, narrowly allowing him to evade the dragon lizard's bite. It was Jason, who had preemptively prepared by manipulating vines to save him. The dragon lizard, frustrated by its failure to catch its prey, charged at Jason with the ferocity of a freight truck, shaking the ground beneath it. Get out of the way. Jason knew without needing to test that they could not withstand this beast. Apart from Jason's use of vines, Riel, Seth, and the others had transformed into massive wolves, barely escaping the dragon lizard's onslaught. The creature, having missed its target, crashed into a wall of earth but seemed unscathed, quickly resuming its assault. Faced with such relentless aggression, the giant wolves were forced to retreat clumsily. Fortunately, although the dragon lizard was exceptionally fast in its straight-line movements, it lacked agility compared to the giant wolves, allowing them to endure the barrage for the time being. However, this could not continue indefinitely. Observing the dragon lizard's patterns, Jason made a significant discovery. The creature's focus was solely on Seth. Riel, Sam, Jerry, you need to distance yourselves from him. Jason urgently relayed his findings to the group, being the first to break away from the fleeing pack. Hearing this, Riel and the others complied, and indeed, the dragon lizard did not pursue them, fixating instead on Seth. Thus, a solitary gray wolf was left being chased by the massive dragon lizard, and the others found a strange humor in the situation, relieved it was not themselves in peril. Seth, it seems it has taken quite a liking to you. Why not stay and play with it? Jason jested. Think of a way to save me. I can barely hold on, brother-in-law. I'm your dear little brother-in-law. Seth cried out, despair evident in his voice. He regretted ever touching that egg. No, he shouldn't have even touched that wall. Observing Seth on the brink of being caught, Jason realized that now was not the time for jest. Leaping into the ruins, he approached the escape route of Seth, channeling the forces of nature into his hands. Two magical vines intertwined, materializing as a tripwire across this crucial path. Upon seeing this, Seth could not contain his joy, leaping over the obstacle to prepare for the imminent fall of the wretched draconic lizard. However, in the next moment, his laughter faded. The magical vines merely caused the subterranean drake to lose its balance slightly, and with a flash of golden light, the vines were torn apart by its immense force. Without the hindrance of the vines, the drake quickly regained its composure and lunged at Seth once more, prompting him to flee with renewed urgency. Jason, though aware from the dragon scales on its body that this was undoubtedly a dragon beast with the bloodline of a dragon, did not anticipate its formidable strength. Indeed, the subterranean drake was a low-tier silver dragon beast, possessing dragon scales, dragon's might, and stony hide as its innate abilities, making it no less powerful than an average mid-tier silver beast. In the face of such disparity, Seth danced perilously on the edge of a blade. He narrowly avoided the drake's charge, yet still found himself hurled away by its sweeping tail. Witnessing this scene, Jason acted swiftly, using the magical vines to catch the flung Seth, preventing further harm. The vines swirled around him, dissipating the impact he had endured, while simultaneously causing the drake, poised to feast, to miss its mark once again. "You all go first. Return the way we came," Jason instructed, using the vines to securely toss Seth to Riel, while he positioned himself defiantly before the drake. The drake, incensed at the persistent disruptor before it, felt its rage surge, its once yellow skin taking on a reddish hue. With another furious roar, it charged forward, yet Jason remained steadfast, unflinching even as Riel could not suppress his concern. In a bold reversal, Jason charged at the drake, narrowly evading its massive jaws, and swiftly ensnared its neck with the magical vines. Utilizing this binding, he ascended onto the back of the drake like a dragon knight. This audacious maneuver not only astonished Riel and the others, who had yet to flee far, but also infuriated the drake, which had always regarded itself as the sovereign of the subterranean realm. It could not abide such humiliation. In an instant, Jason became the top target on its kill list, as it thrashed violently, attempting to dislodge the pest clinging to its back. "What madness is this, you foul lizard?" Jason exclaimed, struggling to maintain his grip. Nevertheless, he tightened his hold as the magical vines spread to bind the drake's eyes and massive jaws, completely ensnaring them. From a distance, it appeared as though the drake's head was adorned with a green hood, an absurd spectacle for such a large creature. The drake charged blindly, colliding with earthen walls, before ultimately plunging into an underground lake with Jason still aboard. The drake writhed violently in the water, propelling itself with frantic energy, causing Jason to inadvertently gulp down a mouthful of water. To his astonishment, this was not the underground water they had envisioned, but rather the briny sea of the ocean. The underwater realm was adorned with brilliantly colored corals, and he observed a multitude of marine creatures, including sea turtles and various species of fish, even catching sight of a shark. However, upon encountering the dominant predator, the cave dragon lizard, a wave of panic ensued, causing them to flee in haste. Yet, one unfortunate sea turtle was struck, spinning like a top before it could regain its composure. Alas, the vehicle's speed was too swift, leaving Jason, the seasoned driver, no time to offer apologies before the turtle vanished from sight, escaping the scene of the incident. Although the forces of nature had augmented his lung capacity, he understood that such exertion could not be sustained indefinitely. He grasped the magical vines with all his might, urging the dragon lizard's head upward, striving to guide it toward the surface. A massive shadow erupted from the lake, shattering the seemingly tranquil waters. A chorus of exhilarated laughter erupted. In that moment, Jason felt that nothing could rival the thrill of riding a dragon, except perhaps riding one that could soar through the skies. Chapter 30. A desperate struggle. Meanwhile, Liar and Seth, along with their companions, faced considerable difficulties during their retreat. The labyrinthine pathways of the underground were treacherous, and a moment's inattention led them astray, bringing them face to face with their quarry, the humanoid spider. "Have we stumbled into a spider's lair? Why are there so many?" Seth lamented. His injuries had healed somewhat over time, and he transformed into the Quileute giant wolf, engaging in combat with the spiders. The four giant wolves coordinated seamlessly. Despite the overwhelming number of humanoid spiders, they did not falter, inflicting heavy casualties upon their foes. However, the arrival of the side spider altered the dynamics of the battle, as its razor-sharp blades began to inflict harm on the giant wolves. A dozen side spiders joined the fray, alongside dozens of humanoid spiders, prompting the wolves to adopt a more cautious approach. Though the combat raged on, the giant wolves chat group was already strategizing their escape. "First, we fell into a lizard's den, and now we've jumped into a spider's nest. I sense today is ill-suited for travel," Seth remarked, discarding the severed head of a humanoid spider. Liar swiftly pounced on a humanoid spider attempting to ambush Seth. "Watch your back. Our mission is reconnaissance. There's no need to engage them," Liar stated calmly. Jason urged her to lead the group back. Although she was deeply concerned for Jason's safety, she remained steadfast in her commitment to the mission. "Retreat," Liar shouted, crashing into a nearby stone pillar. Massive rocks rained down from the cave ceiling like a meteor shower, throwing the previously orderly spider swarm into disarray. The giant wolves, seemingly forewarned, pressed close to the cave's edge, but Liar, responsible for striking the pillar, could not evade the falling boulder, which shattered her arm. After the debris settled, the giant wolves rallied around Liar, pushing through the chaotic swarm of spiders. Their aim was clear: to break free rather than vanquish their enemies. As they toppled the humanoid spiders in their path, with their speed, they would soon outpace the encircling spiders once they broke through. The chaotic visage of the human-faced spider proved utterly ineffective in impeding the advance of the colossal Quileute wolves, who were on the verge of escaping the encirclement. The elation that had just begun to swell among the pack was abruptly interrupted by a gigantic creature descending from the heavens, blocking their path. 6 razor-sharp legs, as keen as daggers, casually carved deep fissures into the ground with each movement. 2 oddly shaped scythes, glinting ominously with a chilling light along their blades, left no doubt regarding their lethal sharpness. The silver-tiered subterranean shadow spider, larger than an elephant, was adept at launching surprise attacks from the shadows. It was then that Sam, with a wry smile, comprehended the reason behind the colossal size of these spiders. Today's encounters had utterly reshaped their worldview. They had just faced a lizard the size of a truck, and now they were confronted with a spider of comparable dimensions. Were all species in this underground realm so titanic? Before them loomed the despair-inducing shadow spider, while behind them regrouped the menacing human-faced spider pack, instilling an unprecedented sense of helplessness within their hearts. Choose your battle. Confront one or engage a swarm, suggested Riel. Faced with this dilemma, the giant wolves hesitated not for a moment, swiftly turning to launch a counterattack against the spider horde. They understood that they might still manage to slay a few human-faced spiders, while the prospect of overcoming a shadow spider seemed utterly daunting. The shadow spider itself was taken aback by the wolves charging towards the spider horde. Witnessing the chaotic clash between the spiders and the wolves momentarily left the massive creature in doubt. However, as the wounds on the wolves multiplied and the scent of blood mingled with the allure of prey, its primal instincts could no longer be contained. With a bizarre, eerie roar, it exerted pressure with its 6 legs, leaving deep grooves in the earth as its immense body lunged into the fray. Get out of the way. Seth was the first to notice the enormous silhouette, casting aside the immediate threat of the scythe spider to evade the impending danger. Even at the cost of his own injury, the other 3 wolves quickly followed suit, but Sam was still struck by the shadow spider's massive scythe across his back. The once thick fur was cleaved open, resulting in a grievous wound. Fortunately, Seth's warning allowed him to avoid a fatal hit, or else the giant wolf would have been entirely impaled. Nevertheless, the excruciating pain nearly overwhelmed him, threatening to revert him to his human form. Observing his plight, the others rushed to his aid. Riel, Seth, and Jerry leveraged their speed to engage the shadow spider, buying precious time for Sam to recover. The sole silver lining was that the human-faced spider, seeing its leader enter the fray, ceased its assault on the group, albeit blocking their escape route. However, the shadow spider was no clumsy behemoth like the subterranean dragon lizard. Its agile 6 limbs transformed into lethal spears, launching an onslaught against the 2 wolves, while its bizarrely large size danced with ferocity. Barely holding on for less than a moment, Seth was sent flying by a massive scythe, and Riel, in a desperate attempt to evade the blade strike, was inflicted with a grievous wound from a sharp spear, struggling to endure. A sense of despair enveloped the crowd, an understanding that escape was futile, and that they might well meet their demise without a trace. However, Lyre was unafraid of death. Her thoughts lingered on Jason, uncertain if he could evade the pursuit of the subterranean dragon lizard. With a fierce roar, Lyre, despite her battered body, summoned the last vestiges of her defiance, launching a final counterattack. Yet, in the face of overwhelming odds, she succumbed to her injuries, collapsing alongside the other great wolves. The subterranean shadow spider, seemingly aware of its victory, emitted a triumphant roar, its cold, bloodthirsty gaze fixed upon the group, its scythe-like appendages quivering in anticipation of the feast that awaited. With a thunderous crash, a massive hole was shattered into the cavern wall. A colossal lizard tumbled between the subterranean shadow spider and the great wolves, the force of its impact leaving even the dragon lizard momentarily dazed. Just as confusion spread among the onlookers, Jason emerged from atop the dragon lizard, addressing the great wolves with words of encouragement. "I'm glad I made it in time," he called out, his voice imbued with hope. However, upon seeing the grievous wounds of the great wolves, especially Lyre's severe injuries, a conflagration of anger ignited within him. If Jason had any flaw, it was his unwavering protectiveness. During his university days, he had once defended a friend who was bullied, taking on 5 assailants single-handedly, sustaining injuries yet ensuring that his adversaries felt the sting of retribution. Jason leaped down from the dragon lizard, landing before Lyre, and before she could utter a word, he enveloped her in his embrace. "I'm so sorry. I'm late," he murmured tenderly as the natural energy within him surged forth, manifesting as a healing touch that flowed rapidly into Lyre's body. Though healing was a skill he had practiced the least, the enhancement from the power of moonlight had significantly augmented his abilities, granting him the capacity to dispel toxins and abnormal states. Lyre's pallid cheeks swiftly regained their color, as if she were immersed in a warm spring. Unconsciously, she let out a soft sound, but upon catching sight of Jason's mischievous grin, her face flushed a deeper shade of red, rendering her utterly adorable. Jason proceeded to tend to the wounds of the others, and under the potent healing touch, their injuries mended without a trace. Nevertheless, reality was not akin to a game. The internal wounds of the group required time to heal completely. While Jason focused on healing his kin, the subterranean shadow spider was locked in a standoff with the dragon lizard. The mere appearance of the dragon lizard instilled in it the feeling of facing a formidable adversary, keeping it in a state of heightened alertness. The subterranean dragon lizard had long been a tyrant in this underground realm, delighting in devouring creatures like the human-faced spider, which offered a particularly delectable feast. Like a rogue knocking at a widow's door, it would often arrive uninvited, indulging in a gluttonous meal before carelessly departing. The subterranean shadow spider had engaged in countless battles with it, yet the lizard's tough hide and formidable defenses, bolstered by its scales and rock-like skin, rendered it a veritable fortress. Each clash resembles a gentle scraping, where the sharp scythe leaves only shallow marks. The abyssal shadow spider relies on the advantage of its spider horde to withstand the confrontation. Observing the perplexed expression of the suddenly appearing abyssal dragon lizard, hesitating whether to engage, one might wonder if it is merely feigning ignorance, leaving it in a state of stalemate. This impasse persisted until Jason completed his healing of the group, urging Riel and the others to retreat to a safer location before he turned his gaze towards the shadow spider. The battlefield transformed from a binary confrontation to a triangular standoff. However, in stark contrast to the two imposing and ferocious beasts, Jason appeared diminutive. Ever since Jason's bloodline power ascended to the silver-tier alpha demon wolf, he had begun to minimize his reliance on the wolf transformation. This was partly due to his desire to refrain from overdependence on the wolf form, as he firmly believed that the essence of power lay within nature itself. Additionally, the wolf form had grown considerably larger post-ascension, prompting concerns about attracting unnecessary attention. With a howl, Jason erupted into a formidable figure. A 4-meter-tall black beast with an air of majesty, the crescent mark upon his brow imparting an aura of mystery. In an instant, the three factions braced themselves, the abyssal shadow spider and the abyssal dragon lizard adopting a more cautious demeanor. This conflict could have been averted. However, retreating in disgrace was unthinkable to Jason. Regardless of Riel's thoughts on the matter, disregarding the abyssal dragon lizard's perspective, it was the first to launch an assault on the shadow spider, unleashing a massive shadowy claw imbued with lunar power, which appeared almost indistinguishable from reality. The very air felt as though it were being torn apart by the claw's might. Unfazed by such an onslaught, the shadow spider retaliated with its grotesquely sharp blades, akin to a master swordsman. A resounding explosion emanated from the two combatants, sending shockwaves outward and raising a cloud of dust that obscured the view for Riel and her companions. Yet, the cacophony of intense collisions signaled the ferocity of the battle within. Amidst a thunderous roar, Jason was propelled from the dust, crashing heavily against a stone pillar before colliding with the wall. Riel gasped in alarm, instinctively moving to assist him. The black demon wolf gradually rose, shaking off the debris. Despite the blood trickling from its mouth, a smirk of derision curled at the corners of its lips. As the dust settled, the onlookers discerned the scene. The shadow spider remained on high alert, one side raised as if poised to strike at any moment. Upon closer inspection, it became evident that one of its sides was propped against the ground due to a severed leg, while its hardened carapace bore deep claw marks, nearly extending to its head. Typically, the giant wolf form would face significant disadvantages against the shadow spider, akin to an armored human wielding a weapon against a wild beast. However, Jason had deeply honed his mastery of the shadow step ability, and if there were two skills he valued most, they would be the lunar eclipse talent and the shadow step talent, regarded as a life-saving and defensive divine skill. He has recently developed a lethal technique, shadow step, a continuous teleportation combined with the rending prowess of shadow claw, enabling him to launch attacks from various unexpected angles with remarkable stealth. The abyssal shadow spider was the first adversary to compel Jason to unleash this technique, and it did not disappoint. It achieved immediate success upon activation. However, due to his lack of proficiency, he failed to evade in time when his magical claws severed the spider's legs, resulting in him being struck and sent flying by the furious shadow spider, sustaining minor injuries, just as he intended to press on with his assault against the shadow spider. The abyssal dragon lizard seemed to have finally regained its composure, its eyes scanning the surroundings, assessing both the humans and the magical beast present. This was the abode of the shadow spider's younger sibling, where he frequently visited for sustenance and even massages. Pondering how he ended up here made him swallow hard. Ah, were those not the egg thieves? Among them was the very individual who had smashed the eggs at my home. And recalling that incited a surge of anger within him, just as he was about to take a step forward, he suddenly caught a whiff of a familiar scent, the scent of the black magical wolf, strikingly reminiscent. As realization dawned, the abyssal dragon lizard's fury reached a boiling point. Its mind clouded by rage, its eyes bloodshot. In that moment, it thought of nothing else and charged furiously at the black magical wolf. Observing the rampaging abyssal dragon lizard, Jason felt a sense of helplessness. His target was the shadow spider, and this creature, with its tough hide and robust flesh, was not one he wished to engage. Glancing at the distant shadow spider, which seemed intent on sneaking away, he deftly dodged the dragon lizard's onslaught and swiftly surged toward the shadow spider. The massive scythe of the shadow spider intercepted Jason's claws, while its other colossal scythe swung back to force him to retreat. Of course, we should engage together. Such opportunities are rare. Jason teased in a playful tone, not caring whether the creature understood. He skillfully evaded the charging abyssal dragon lizard,